Hello everybody and welcome to a very special extra stream for the top 60 favorite series of 2025. So far, according to me, Krisis, you are having one live on your screens today. So if you've ever seen this channel before, welcome back. And you know that I usually am talking about a pull list of comics that are out every week. And if you've never seen this comic before, or this channel before, I am Krisis with a K, as I've appeared throughout the comic book internet for the past 15 years and throughout the internet at large for well over 25 years at this point. And I am known for making comic book guides at crushingkrisis.com. Yes, I am that person. And I have guides to all of the Marvel universe, much of the DC universe, and a lot of indie comics as well. But here on YouTube, I tend to talk about new releases. So I have read all of the releases that have been out so far in 2025. I go through the entire pull list every week using a combination of previews and League of Comic Book Geeks to figure out everything that's out. I read pretty much every Marvel or DC book, or at least keep up with them because I have to keep up my guides, but I also read a very wide range of indie, including Image, Dark Horse, Mad Cave, IDW, Boom, and many smaller independent released comics as well. And so I wanted to come together and talk about what my favorite books of the first half of this year has been. Now, we're about a month past the end of the first half of the year, and you've probably seen a lot of lists of this nature out there. And the thing that I always say you should ask when you see one of those lists is, what was your sample size? Because if they're saying these are the 10 best comics of the year, okay, well, what did you read? The 10 best from what? Because I can honestly say these are the 10 best of me taking a look at every single comic that has been out this year and reading over 60% of those comics, even if I just checked in on some of them. The ones I actually read is a huge amount. Those of you who watch this channel every week know that I review between 40 and 70 individual issues every week. So I'm not saying my opinion is any more right than anybody else's opinion. I'm just saying that everybody else's opinion may not have a sample size of about 390 unique comic volumes that had releases in 2025. So what qualified something to be on this list? And then we're going to jump right in. So to qualify for this list, a series needed to have at least 3 issues out in release between December 1st of 2024 and June 30th of 2025. Why do I start in December? I found that on a lot of these lists throughout the years issued by other people, that a lot of books that straddle the new year, that have like a couple issues in the previous year and a couple issues of the new year, they just get forgotten. And I feel like there's no attention to them, even if some of them were the best books. So I tend to double count December. I will read up until the end of December for my list for the prior year, but I'll also give books the benefit of the doubt of starting with their December books for the new year. Because there were some great books that are on this list that only had 2 issues out in January and February that probably would get forgotten otherwise because they were 2 great issues, but because I count the December release as well, they count for 3. And in terms of the order they put them in, the other thing I would ask when you're looking at other people's lists is not only what is your sample size, but how did you put the list together? Was it just on gut? Because that doesn't exist here at Crushing Krisis. Data or it didn't happen is what we say. So this is based on my custom algorithm, which takes into account my regular ratings, how long the series has been running, and a recommendation index of how much I am loving every single issue of the series. So all 60 of these books are books I heartily recommend. There's no bad stuff on this. This is not going to be a ranting stream where I rant about anything. This is going to be all positive vibes only. Even the things at 60, I found myself as I was going through these books going like, I can't believe that's at 60. It feels like it's my number 5 book, but that's why you need data, and people who just do this by gut, don't trust them. So with all that said, I'm going to say a few quick hellos to the people who are very regular fans of the channel that are in the live chat here. There's a reason I wanted to do this live. I wanted to get your reactions and your favorites too. Plus it involved 880 image files and I was not in the mood to edit all of that together, so we're doing it live. So let me say hello to a few people in the comments and then we're going to dig right in. Our first commenter today, Cedric and Ellen, saying, see me tonight because they are in Europe. Superjob saying, another day, another crisis. Bunkmaster saying, can't wait to hear me talk about how much I loved The Moon is Following Us, which is actually, I checked before the stream, in my bottom 13 comic books of the year out of the 390 series that I read. Let's see, Cool Angel chimed in a little bit just about my methodology, which I've already mentioned. So thank you, Cool Angel, for giving me that note. So I thought to talk about it. Yone Pauls is here talking about a topic that is not for the show, which is the mapping of a brand new Fall of X Omnibus. Edwin Billiot, who's one of our regulars, is here today as well. I'm just going to say hello to a few more folks. Maul360, Reaper XC, Jamie C47, who had so many great contributions to our weekly stream yesterday. Nick N, James Abel, the Cerebro of the comic broadcasting internet. Rexmo is here, who's going to go to sleep, and now is with us. And I think, oh, Logan Wayne, as I was doing my mic and internet check, Paul Gundrum. And I think, oh, and Renee is Spawn. Will any Spawn titles make it into my top 60? I was definitely a little bit down on the Spawn this week in my weekly show. My good friend Max is here. He's a new Beatle bop of one of my favorite Beatles songs of all time, I Will. So please check out his channel. That is the name of his YouTube channel. He posts a wonderful jazz guitar all the time. He's a jazz guitar professional in the Netherlands. And One Wheelchair X, who I was missing dearly yesterday because I wanted to see him chime in. Sazmurf, Javier Hernandez. And I think now I've said hello to almost all of the unique human beings. Mink0029 is here, as well as Anna May. So I'm so happy to see so many regular faces. Please chime in as we go. This will not be like one of my regular streams where I make you wait until the gaps. I'm really just going to try to chat with you as we go. This is the biggest files with the most images I've ever tried to do on this channel. So we're just going to keep our fingers crossed that the sad little laptop can catch up. And with no more preamble, let's begin. Oh gosh, I'm nervous. So again, all of these books are books that I love. All of these books are books that I would recommend. All of these books, if you hear me say it today, I'm telling you to check it out. I'm going to try to explain why. I'm not going to go with the timer today because I just think my computer might explode. So let's start out with my number 60 title. Again, no lesser than 50 or 40 or 30, just a slightly lower recommendation index. Okay, and we're going to do 60 top 60. Here we go. This is Nightwing. It is written by Dan Waters. The regular artist on it is Dexter Stoy with Veronica Gandini on colors and Wes Abbott on letters, although we did have 2 issues with Francesco Francavilla on colors with Wes Abbott on letters, and Francavilla did his own colors. Now, I really had some skepticism about this series as I was catching up to it. It's by Dan Waters, and we're coming off of that brilliant, brilliant Tom Taylor Nightwing run. And so anything after that, not only might it risk being a little bit of a disappointment, but it's like, what are you going to do? Because the Tom Taylor run was so interesting, so good, so tied into Nightwing's own identity as Dick Grayson, as the son of Bruce Wayne, as the lover of Barbara Gordon, as the brother, as it turns out, of the mayor of this town, as of the protector of Bloodhaven. So where do you go from there? And at the beginning, I'll admit, I wasn't really with it, but that was in 2024, and we're not doing any negative vibes about anything that came out in 2025, because every month, this book has really grown for me within this year. And that's because Dan Waters took it from what felt like a very standard Nightwing book. He's swinging around, there's mob members, there's police, to find a sort of hidden thread of horror and a little bit of body horror in it as well. Kind of excavating the evidence of what's been left behind from past confrontations, past supervillains in Bloodhaven, as Nightwing tries to navigate. If he's trying to not only protect his city, but protect everyone in it, then actually, does he have to protect the monsters too? Does he have to protect the bad guys too? And what happens when the police, in the case of some cases in Bloodhaven, are also the bad guys, which is really what this 2-issue arc with Francesco Francavilla and art that was masterful. It really felt like Bloodhaven Central rather than Gotham Central. Love, love, love it. And coming out of that, it just feels like the book has so much cool energy, and I've totally never seen Dexter Soy draw quite like this. He's always been heavy on the inks. He's always had these very chiseled looks, but this to me is a whole other level, especially with the coloring that he's got here. It just really feels like I've never seen him achieve at this level with the coloring from Veronica Gandini, and that really excites me. So I'm a big, big fan of Nightwing. I think it's going interesting places, and I just love the slightly horrific undercurrent in it. I know that's usually Batwoman's vibe in the Bat universe, but for me, it is really working here. Genre me wondering if my top 60 reflects my opinion on the current Marvel DC quality gap. Well, I guess we'll see. I was thinking about doing publisher statistics, and maybe I'll do some off the cuff at the end, but I just wanted to keep the focus on the books themselves and not really make it about Marvel's great, DC's not. But certainly there are some publishers who are overrepresented in this data and some publishers who are underrepresented in this data based on the amount of books that they release. And maybe at the end, we'll talk about that a little bit. You know, Nick, and I was kind of soft on Nightwing to begin with because I really didn't see the vision, and maybe the vision was there and I just wasn't really picking up on it. But as it has gone on, I've just gotten more and more exciting. how would I rank all of the runs of Nightwing? Well, I think that is a bigger purview than this show, but really, you know, there's only like 4 or 5, maybe 6 giant runs of Nightwing, and I think most people tend to be either kind of like a Chuck Dixon person or a New 52 person. In my experience, I am personally a big fan of Grayson by Tom King and Tim Seeley. Just looking at Nick's name here. Okay, I'm old school. Wasn't Bloodhaven blown up during Infinite Crisis? I don't pretend to understand anything about 2000s DC continuity. Okay. And I would love to go back and do timestamping for this. I probably will, although 60 timestamps is a lot, but I didn't want to spoil the top 60 before the show by putting them into the comments. All right, let's continue with book number 59. This book is Superman from DC Comics. It is written by Joshua Williamson, and it's had a number of different artists on it. And by the way, this also includes not only the main run of Superman, but the Lex Luthor special that definitely filled in the gaps between these issues. So we have seen some art from Dan Mora on this. We have seen some art from Eddie Barrows on this, and they've been the main 2 artists, but we've had a few other ones in there, including a repeat appearance from an earlier artist, Jamal Campbell, also Eber Ferreira, and some other folks too, Sean Isaacs. There have really been a lot of pencilers on this book in the last little bit. And that's because this Superman book has really been going through a transition. The first 20-ish issues of this were really about establishing the current world of Metropolis and all of the world around Superman, and I loved them very much. This was actually even higher on my countdown if I had done it for 2024. But now that we've established all of that world, we're really leaning into the conflict, because nothing can stay status quo forever. We can't just be happy working at the Daily Planet forever. We can't just have Lois has superpowers forever, which is how we started this run. And so Williamson is kind of methodically making problems out of all of these things. He's making a problem out of Lois having her powers. He's making a problem out of Lex getting his memories back little by little after being a pretty verified good guy over time. And he's making a problem out of a very interesting take on Doomsday, kind of coming back from the future or back from the past and having a connection to a very iconic DC character that we know in the past as a sort of a cloaked, looming figure. I will say that this definitely had a very clean line looked in the first 2 years, because not only of Dan Mora, but also Jamal Campbell, who do very clean, very kind of animated looks. And so the transition to Eddie Barrows, who I also really, really like, was a little bit rough at first, and maybe that reflects some of my hesitance in recommending this. But as we've settled into Eddie Barrows, and as Eddie Barrows has kind of settled into how he wants to render each of these characters, including Lex Luthor's daughter, Lena Luthor there, I really have enjoyed the artwork, and I think it's delivering a lot of very iconic Superman panels. I love having Superman in the top 60. I think it's really cool that a book of one of the holy trinity of the DC is here and is this fun to read, because I also love that Joshua Williamson has introduced new characters. I get very bored in Superman when it is just a redux of Lois and Lex and Doomsday and Lois and Lex and Doomsday over and over again, but we've got so many cool new villains and allies around the edges of this book that has really kept me in it. And I also really love that all of the artists have really been unified by the color looks. Even though the colors have changed, colors can certainly maintain a color looks, and it's largely been colored by Alejandro Sanchez on these recent issues, and I've really, really enjoyed it. So I actually very much recommend starting this book all the way from the very beginning. I think it reads really great from all the way from the beginning, and it's really a cool journey for Superman. But you know what? If you jumped in the middle, I don't know that you would be lost. By the way, the letter's on this book by Ariana Maher. So now we are going to continue first to look at the comments, if anybody had anything. Yeah, you did hear me mention Tom King positively when I was talking about Nightwing. You know, King, for me, if I'm trying to put on my being fair to everybody hat, I think he's a writer whose ideas are so interesting, but they're even more interesting to me when they're slightly diluted by other people's interesting ideas. And I think there's a lot of writers like that in the current market, where them undiluted is a little bit much for me. Some of those writers get that from their artistic collaborators, but I think King writes such structured scripts that it's actually helpful if he's co-writing with somebody from the very beginning to kind of water down those aspects of him that I don't love, and many people do love him, and he sells a lot of comic books, so there's nothing wrong with that. But there are certainly some creators that I think when they have a collaborator as an artist, the way that Mark Waid collaborates with Chris Samsey, rather, I think there's something really, really special that happens. Bonjour to Alex Infirmier, or perhaps bonsoir to you, because of where I assume you are right now, and also hello to Rami Darwish joining us. Okay. See, I was right. It is Bonsoir. Okay, let's continue to the next book, number 58. Now, this is actually, weirdly, one of my favorite comics approaching all time. It's just that it has only had a few issues out this year, and they kind of straddled the beginning of an arc, so I haven't really had my full level of satisfaction with this yet, even though I recommend it so highly, and it is Kaya, which is a Image Comics book from Wes Craig doing the story, the art, and the design with absolutely brilliant colors from Jason Wordie, letters from Tom Napolitano. Gotta put respect to my Italian brethren's name, Tom Napolitano. So you've heard me pretty recently go off at length about how much I love this book as I caught up to it on my pull list show. But to catch you up to where it began this year, here in issue number 24, so we're 2 years in, there is this young girl and her brother, and their entire family, who is the ruling family of the human empire in this world, have been killed by the robot empire, robot pictured here. And so they are on a quest to perhaps kickstart the human race by bringing back some kind of rulership of them and by defeating the robots. And they both have their own individual mission. So Kaya has this golden arm, you could see it a few times on this page, that really is super strong and kind of can beat up anything. And her brother may be the magical golden one who can bring back kind of a golden era and defeat all of these forces that are formed against them. It definitely has major saga vibes in terms of the setup of its story between the wars between kind of robots and mutants and baseline humans. But it's not an intergalactic book like Saga. It's very much a kid's hero's journey that is also very appealing to adults. So every arc is a very self-contained story of one particular thing that Kaya and her brother get into, and then we also in between arcs have single issues that show what is happening in the rest of the world. So we've just wrapped up one arc and headed into the next. One of the interesting things about it right now is they finally have an adult who's kind of chaperoning him, but he's not the most responsible adult, and so we've kind of gone through 2 years of these kids just fending for themselves as orphans, and now we have them with another influence, and partly his influence on them is to take more direct action and like actually do more to disrupt the robots' empire. So now they have gone into a slave city of mutants and they're thinking about liberating it, although Kaya's version of liberating it and her brother's version of liberating it are very different. So that is Kaya, and I am so excited. Superdrop saying Kaya is top 10. Jamie's surprised to see Kaya so low after gushing on the pull list. But to me, that's, as I said, because it was only, I think, 4 issues out so far this year, and it was like the 2 issues at the end of the arc, one of those in-betweener issues, and the first 2 issues of a new arc. So I kind of feel like we're in the middle, and it's hard for me to just recommend it where it is in its run right now, even though overall it's probably it's one of my top 20 books of the last probably 10 years. Also, Mink 009, asking, sorry if I mentioned this, but is this the top 60 out of how many titles from December to June? I read about 390 titles. Some of them didn't make it to 3 issues or they had already ended. Some of them were just one-shots, but in terms of tracking unique series, this is 60 of my top 390, so it is about a top 15%-ish of all of the books I'd read. I would have gone down as far down as I could heartily recommend every one of these books. In the past, in 2019, I did a top 125 at the end of the year. So that's why I wanted to do this mid-year. I've actually always wanted to do a mid-year stream. I just don't think anybody does mid-year recommendations well that I've seen. And that's a lot of where a lot of my content comes from, whether it's the pull list or crushingcrisis.com. When I feel like I don't see anybody out in the world doing the thing the way I think it should be done, that is where an idea is formed. So this is just all the things that I urge you to put onto your pull list through the middle of this year if they appeal to you. Yeah, Kaya to me feels like an all-timer. I hold it up to Saga. I truly think the quality level is the same as Saga, and the art is phenomenal. I've said this on streams before, but I don't think any of us knew Wes Craig was capable of this. We all knew he was a great artist. We loved him on Deadly Class, but this is a real chance that he took to go and say, you know what, I'm going to do my own indie, totally solo writing and art fantasy adventure kids comic. That there was no guarantees that was going to be received well or that he was going to be great at it, and actually it is so much greater than anything else that I've seen from him. I absolutely love it. I will say volume 1 kind of hard to track down now. Image number 1s do tend to get stealth reprints, so it probably won't be hard to find forever, but I did a little bit of panic purchasing and I did purchase one. Okay, now we come to number 57 on the list. Number 57, Renee Spawn is going to be happy because this is Violator, and it's actually called Violator origin, although that is not actually in the title or in the indicia, but that is how it was credited as it was released. And something that was really interesting about this series, which we had the last 3 issues of this 6-issue miniseries within the release window that I am reviewing today, it was entirely scripted and plotted by Mark Andreyko, but he had a different penciler on every issue. So the issues that we're going to look at today, one of them was pencils by Kevin Maguire, the other one by Von Randall, and then the December books I actually don't have in this accounting. They were just influencing on the vote. And of course, it's all lettered by World Design. And they had different colorists on every issue as well. So the thing that I really liked about this was the way that it was structured. It was done as 6 individual slices of Violator, who, if you don't read Spawn, is kind of the demon-in-chief who is one of Spawn's main antagonists. And he was introduced very, very early in Spawn, and actually he has a very famous miniseries, which has finally been collected from back in the 90s, that was written by Alan Moore. And so now we go back and take a look at his origin. The first few issues of this were absolutely brilliant. Actually, if we were looking at my 2024 ratings, this would be much higher in the list because I thought the first 2 issues were just a knockout punch. But I really liked how episodic it was. It did go in order of his life, but you really could just pick up any one issue. And as we get closer and closer to the modern day, we see things that are more and more part of the world that we know, like World War II, rather than just seeing him kind of in an unspecified prehistoric or biblical time. We do see him at one point, I think earlier in the series, fight a dinosaur. But he is in an ongoing discussion / confrontation with various angels because he, as it turns out, was originally an angel who was fallen from heaven, much like Lucifer, and so he has relationships both with Lucifer and other angels, some of whom are hunting him. I just really liked how this took us all the way to the modern day. Many people know Violator as this kind of chubby clown character, and that's how he often appears in Spawn, but this just gives so much more texture to who he is and why he's the agent of chaos today that he is, and it almost made it so that I rooted for him. And I think every one of the arts throughout was absolutely brilliant. Kevin Maguire was a little clean for it, honestly, compared to how dirty some of the rest of it was. So this was Kevin Maguire's art. This one was colored by Rosemary Cheatham. I liked it looking a little more dirty and ugly, like Von Randall, who does a lot of the Spawn covers, looked here, colored by Brad Simpson. But it was just a book I really, really liked, and I think the great thing of it is, it's a great intro to the Spawn universe. A lot of the Spawn universe is hard to parse, it's hard to get excited about, it's hard to figure out where to start it, but this particular book really is an easy entry point, not just because it's origins, but because Andreyko just designed it so perfectly to be so episodic, book by book. Renee Spawn saying, "Spawn, let's go!" Violator, he'd be consensual to me. And I hope you consent to checking out that book. This is number 56. And this is a series that is a character and that's totally new to me, but with a writer that I've increasingly begun to trust. And that is Jeremy Adams writing Flash Gordon for Mad Cave. And he has had 2 artists on this, actually 3. Will Conrad, who launched the book in the first arc that came out in 2024, was absolutely brilliant. And then that transitions to having some Cliff Richards art. And then also after Cliff Richards, we start getting Tom Darenick on art. And it's all colored very consistently by Lee Luffridge and lettered by Taylor Esposito. If you've ever read Flash or you have no historical relationship with Flash Gordon, he's kind of just like a Pulp Fiction space adventurer. He's that guy from Earth that has the helmet on and is going out through space, exploring it and kind of encountering alien civilizations, falling in love with their princesses, and kind of interfering. So he's got a little bit of Han Solo baked into him. He's got a little bit of a swashbuckling quality baked into him. He's got a little bit of an exploring quality baked into him. But what's been so great about this series is that it picks up kind of right in the middle of a story so that you can have excitement about this character in the story without knowing any of that. So if you read back to number 1, which came out last year, he wakes up and we wake up with him, and the universe has changed. Empires he's familiar with have crumbled, and allies have shifted their allegiances. And so this arc that's happening in this year is very much about him getting the band back together, figuring out who he can trust, are his old companions around, and are his old antagonists still his antagonists. So many of you have heard of, I think, is Ming, who is his main antagonist, his main enemy, and he's actually briefly allied with Ming here because he's got to do something to kind of find the structure of this universe again. I really love the Pulp Fiction quality of it. I really love the artwork. I really love the colors of it, and it just has this whole universe, and I love a book where there's a whole universe of story to learn about, and I feel like there's a whole continuity, but it keeps me focused, and it introduces one character, a group of characters at a time, so I feel like I'm really being brought along with the story, and I really feel like this book is doing that as it is going along, and so I'm really kind of following it. I'm falling in love with the characters, even though I started literally from zero on this. Jamie C47 is saying, love that first Flash Gordon trade. Yeah, the first trade was absolutely outstanding, and if I'm being honest, I was a little bit nervous if I was going to still like it after Will Conrad was off the art. He's still doing the covers rather, not the colors, because I really, really, really love Will Conrad, but I do think that the art is still working, and I really think the story has kept me hooked, and I like that it doesn't feel too similar to Jeremy Adams on Green Lantern, because doing another space kind of adventure book, you would fear perhaps that some of the themes would overlap, but I don't feel that they do at all. Cedric and Ellen saying the original Flash Gordon inspired a lot of the early Belgian comic creators, which is very, very cool to know. Okay. Superjob wants to read this and Defenders of the Earth. Just to note, the Defenders of the Earth series is not in continuity with this. It is a Flash Gordon series starring Flash Gordon, but it does not happen at the same time as this story in this book. Okay. Oh, and there was still more. Yeah, really, I loved this page a lot. I think Tom Derenick really does well. Actually, when we're in the kind of spacier environments here, I like how his characters kind of very boldly stand off the page. It almost gives me a little bit of a Terry Dodson vibe on this particular page. Okay. Part of why I wanted to do this as a stream in this format is I really wanted to take you inside of all the books with all the selected pages that I've chosen throughout the year. So this has 26 weeks worth of selected pages from all of these books. I pared it down a little bit because in some shows I'll show 3 pages, and I tried not to show more than 2 per issue here. But I really want you to get it. My goal is that you come away with this with new books on your pull list. And so I really, really wanted to sell every one of the books based on their strongest elements. Oh no, we got one thing out of order. Hopefully it doesn't spoil something that happened later. Pretend you didn't see that. Next, we have at number 55, Katabasis. And this is a book that you've heard me talk about a lot if you have been watching the show regularly this year. This is from BlackBox Comics. It's available on globalcomics.com to read if you have not got it in floppy. That's the only place to get it digitally. I have just been stunned by the quality of a lot of the BlackBox Comics books. This one is written by Damian Becton with pencils, inks, and colors from Carlos Lopez and letters from Desi Cienti. And part of what is so cool about this, other than just the wild character design and the amazing colors, is that it's a story that I really found appealing, and it had the right scope for a miniseries, because this was a 5-issue miniseries. It's about somebody who's sort of a Black Widow-esque character who gets sucked into the job of ferrying souls between heaven and hell through limbo. And so she has a corporal presence on the real world, but then she also has this kind of agent of heaven and hell presence, which she uses to do things like break souls out of their prison, to smuggle them onto Sharon's ship, steal his gold, and find a way to get them into heaven. This had a wonderful mix of doing really cool adventurous stuff with big battles and also just really cool hellscapes of art. I enjoyed it throughout. And just really, really cool artwork that matched the quality of the cover, which for me is always something really big. You know, I get very frustrated when the interior art cannot stand up to the cover. And I thought a lot of the action was like pretty bold and clear. And I just really enjoyed that. These are a little bit out of order, and it seems like I took 100 different images of it. So sorry about that. But here we see her fighting against this giant devil. And I just love all of the colors on the page. I love how her pinks and blues stand her out against it. I'm a big proponent of trying these smaller publishers, seeing if you like them, giving them a chance. If we never read anything that looks unfamiliar to us, then are we ever going to grow or change as readers? So I'm a big, big fan of checking that out. And I get it. You're all busy. You don't have the time to track down every book from every small publisher. So this one has my very, very, very strong endorsement. I had fun in every issue. I was always racing to read the next one. And I cannot wait to see more from this writer, Daniel Becton, because I really, really think, or Damian Becton, I'm sorry, because I really, really think he's got something special here, and that a lot of indie series on a book this small, 5 issues, they wouldn't know where to frame it. They'd be trying to do her complete origin story and this complete adventure and a love thing and her, protecting this kid. This really pared down to a main thread of plot that really still let me fall in love with the character. And I thought that that was a really, really good way to go. Oh, Katabasis genre me says, of course, I read the first issue and needed more immediately. I should definitely finish reading it. I agree. Ryan Wilson, a regular fan of the channel, says, do I have some database where I save all my notes and all of these things that I've reviewed? Yes, I do. Unfortunately, I don't know if it would be Patreon appropriate because I say some nasty things there and then I kind of edit myself down to air here. But I have considered if there would be some form of that I can make public, if there would maybe be a way to post my reviews as I write them on a Discord or something like that. So I'll take that under advisement, Ryan, because I mean, I do a lot of writing, but I will say that for Marvel and DC and Image, all of that writing does wind up factored into my new release posts on crushingcrisis.com. But, you know, you then don't get to see all the things I write about indies like this on Katabasis. So I will think about that. Yeah, I don't know what happened with the ordering of these. This was, as I mentioned, over 800 individual image files, so there was a lot of wrangling. All right, if you were watching closely, you got a quick tease of this one earlier. Number 54 is Eddie Brock Carnage, written by Charles Soule. It started out with Jesus Says on art with colors by himself, as well as Matt Hollingsworth and letters from Joe Sabino, although we have transitioned to some other artists on the book, including Juan Ramirez, still colored by Matt Hollingsworth. So I know you're looking at this maybe and going, Eddie Brock and Carnage? How does that work? Because Eddie Brock, usually, as we all know, is Venom. But in the wake of the Venom War and the first Al Ewing Venom series that concluded at the end of 24, the status quo is shaken, and Eddie Brock is removed from his typical Venom symbiote, and so he pairs with the Carnage symbiote, hoping to keep control and to keep the symbiote away from people like Cletus Cassidy, who will turn it into a murderous rampage. But the deal that they have to strike together is that they will work together to do some killing, because Carnage demands some carnage, but he will only kill other killers, or at least that's where we begin. But of course, when he finds himself on a plane ride in the first issue with somebody else who may have been a murderer, Carnage takes the opportunity to say, what if we were just to kill everybody on this plane? That wouldn't be such a bad thing, right? And so this entire series deals with two primary stories, one of which is the literal battle inside of Eddie Brock's brain between him and Carnage over the control. And I think these scenes have been the most fun. We get this very dapper Carnage in this very attractive suit. He sometimes wrestles with Flash Thompson's head with arms coming out of it, trying to punch him and wrestle him off of his head. And then we have the external mystery, both of them trying to find other people that it's okay to kill, and also whatever happened to that plane of people, Eddie Brock is not even sure. What I really love about this is Charles Soule is a fantastic writer of villains, and this pushes the villainy to a cartoonish level. Here we see Bushwhacker pouring ammo into his mouth so he can turn it into ammunition to have a fight with Carnage. And so I really think that this is kind of pushed almost to an absurd level without being pushed to a hyper bloody level. I think a lot of times Carnage books are bloody just to be bloody because the people are like, well, that's what people are going to like about Carnage. But this is actually entertaining to me in a different way because it pushes the absolute cartoonishness of his violence further. And it's still bloody and it's still violent, but it's not blood soaked. Maul360 saying, love Eddie Brock. Absolutely. Okay. And this is that, I love the scene. This is one of the indelible scenes to me of the year, of the Carnage here in a different coat that here looks like it's kind of like flocked Muppet hair or feathers or something. And he's trying to break into Eddie Brock's locked brain inside of Eddie Brock's brain. Very, very cool stuff. Okay, now we come to 53. This is going to surprise some of you because it's a publisher that you don't read that much, but if you've been watching me regularly, you would know that I am a big fan, and that is Zenescope. And this is a mini-series, 3 issues, called Terror and Fury. So let's talk a second about this. I'm not going to explain all of Zenescope. You've heard me do that many weeks over the course of this year if you watch my show regularly. But Zenescope is often known as the cheesecakey publisher because they put out books like this one that have very attractive female characters on the cover. But many people don't know what's inside of the books, and one of the things that's changed in about the past year of Zenescope is they've introduced a more pure superhero universe to their continuity. They've had an ongoing Grimm Fairy Tales continuity, which is very much all super characters, but they're based on fairy tales. They're based on Beauty and the Beast. They're based in Alice in Wonderland. They're based in basically all of the Disney movies that have been open public domain enough that they could swipe the character and turn them into somebody who wears a skimpy costume, right? But actually the stories are quite interesting. But this is something different. It's Zenescope trying to take that same public domain approach, but take that approach to characters that could have been superheroes in the 40s and 50s that would be in the public domain, as well as kind of cryptids that would be in the public domains that wouldn't necessarily fall into that fantasy realm. So this is written by one of their main brain trusts, Joe Bruscia. It's art by Jordi Tarragona, colors from Walter Pereira, and letters from Taylor Esposito. And these two characters are revived from World War II, and they're Terror and Fury, and one of them is sort of a Catwoman character. She's got a whip, she's got her cat costume, she's, you know, in it to slay vampires. The other one is almost more of like a Midnighter or like a Punisher character who got drafted in the army, but he's kind of like all bad news for bad guys. He was kind of the dark mirror of a Captain America character that goes into World War II and fights. And so this series kind of explores, why are they back in the modern day? And was their enemy that they fought back in the 1940s truly defeated? So it's got a little bit of the kind of like Cap fighting against Red Skull and then Cap kind of getting frozen in the ice. This is their parallel version of that. And I just think, again, one of the things I really like about a miniseries like this is keep the focus tight. Don't try to do everything. This establishes these two characters. It introduces a lot of the history of one of them, and it just sends them on one mission that's connected to that history. It's not trying to do a whole thing and it's a whole supporting cast. There's a couple of brief appearances from other characters that are part of the superheroes line at Zenescope, but it kept the focus pretty tight. It had really easy to follow action. I just was very impressed with Jordi Tarragona's art, colored by Walter Pereira. It just was very pleasant to look at, and the characters stood off from the backgrounds really well, and it really, really just for me, kept me hooked on every issue. So this is why I read small publishers. I know not all of you have the time or the intention to do it, but this is an example of just 3 issues that you could easily pick up and enjoy from Zenescope. Now we come to number 52. Number 52 is one that perhaps will surprise you for other reasons, maybe because of the creator on it or maybe because of the topic, because it is Predator versus Spider-Man. It's written by Benjamin Percy with art from Marcelo Ferreira, inks from Jay Leaston, colors from Frank Dermata, and letters from Clayton Cowles. This book continues Benjamin Percy's tear through having the Predator fight against various characters of the Marvel Universe, and although some of the books are loosely in continuity to each other, they are not in Marvel continuity, and they are not kind of like in any ongoing story that is part of Marvel. So this takes us back to a point where it seems the implication is that Spider-Man is with Mary Jane and Peter Parker is still working at the Daily Bugle, so it's at least probably 10 years ago. I just really, really love the art and colors here. I love Marcelo Ferreira's way he draws Spider-Man. I like a very bendy Spider-Man. I like a Spider-Man that can get into positions that I probably could not get into myself, but also I love any time that there's a genre mashup with Spider-Man that makes him feel really out of place without making things too fantastical. I'm not a big like Spider Totems fan, but to bring the Predators and their hyper violence and to have Spider-Man's perception of the Predators be, oh, there's serial killers in this city, that to me is an interesting mashup for Spider-Man. And then of course to bring in Kraven, because Kraven is the master hunter but the Predators are the master hunters, kind of creates a triangle of conflict here as Spider-Man's trying to get to the bottom of these supposed serial killer murders, not realizing that they are from Predators, and Kraven is trying to decide if there's something here doing better hunting than he is. The art has just been phenomenal, and actually I think Benjamin Percy is much better on lighter characters that have a hint of the grim. I really, really liked him on Green Arrow at DC, and I really am enjoying him on this. I like how he writes Deadpool. I just don't know if books that are all grim all the time, like a Wolverine or a Ghost Rider, are the right fit for him. I think Benjamin Percy needs a little chance to be a little bit more lighthearted in his books sometimes, and perhaps that's why this one is hitting for me so well. But again, you know, I love a well-drawn Spider-Man. He's not my favorite character in comics, but when people draw him well, I get very, very excited, and a huge part of that is the colors. I think Jay Leaston nails the absolute look of what the suit should look like here, and it really makes me excited. Jamie C47 saying Predator versus Spider-Man is my favorite Spider book in a good few years. Love it. Love the horror aspects, art, and multiple converging plots. I would agree with everything you said. As I mentioned earlier, Jamie C47 is fantastic at summarizing my thoughts. Now we are at issue number 51, and series number 51. This one might surprise you if you haven't been watching the show regularly, but if you have, you know the adoration I have for this book. It is DCX Sonic the Hedgehog that mashes up all of the major Sonic characters with all of the major Justice League characters as they cross between their two worlds. Now, I am not a big fan of the Sonic IP, so there's not really a lot of love I have for these characters. I know who they are, I've played Sonic games, but that is not enough that's going to like make me ultra hype for this book. The thing that makes me ultra hype for this book is the way that they're combined with the Justice League and the way it's treating the Sonic characters like they're superheroes, but also it's treating their world like it's under a much bigger threat from Darkseid than it's ever been before. And so we get to first see them very pleasingly team up, and this book kind of takes the approach of doing little capsule vignettes, which I think would work well for younger readers, but it's still fun for older readers, of pairing particular superheroes with particular Sonic characters and seeing their face-offs and their team-ups and the way their powers are similar to each other. As you can see, all of the team-ups arrayed on this page. But something that was really interesting to me is eventually there's a fracture in the universes, and the Sonic characters go over to the DC universe, and it mirrors very closely the actual plot of the DC universe right now, which is everything that happened at the end of Absolute Power leading into the All-In special and then the Absolute DC books. So while this is not necessarily in continuity, it's very easy to imagine it fitting into the current world. And for me, pour moi, I really like when a book that's a flight of fancy like this book gives you some grounding about where it could happen in the universe, or it just tells you, I'm an Elseworld, this is nothing like real life. But this one actually grounds you pretty close to the current DC universe, so if you're a DC fan, you know, they're on the Watchtower, Mr. Terrific is in charge of the Justice League, it's very similar to the current books. It's written by a very regular Sonic writer, Ian Flynn, with absolutely adorable art from Adam Bryce Thomas, with colors from Matt Herms and letters from one of my favorite letterers, Becca Carey. Really, really enjoy this. I just think it is so adorable. And James Abel saying DC X Sonic is so great. And just, I love the DC characters through the Sonic lens. They look like themselves, they're on model, but there's just something about the lens of way human beings look in the Sonic world that makes me really, really excited. I love this big, muscular Wonder Woman taking out some of the threats, because actually the DC heroes are also stuck on the Sonic world. And we get this great scene of Superman fighting Eggman, and Eggman saying, what is that? Is it a bird, a plane? It's Superman! Love it. Okay, let's continue. Actually, that's the end of this PDF, so let me pause that screen share and load up the next one so that we can continue to the next 10 books. This took so much doing, let me tell you. But I'm so happy to be here talking about them to you. I literally have wanted to do this ever since 2019, and me doing that 2019 show where I, or not, actually it wasn't a show, it was a Twitter thread to throw back to 2019. It was my first time ever saying like, oh, I really would love it if I could just really, after doing all of this reading, could really highlight what I loved about the whole year for everybody. And so I'm really hoping that it can become something regular that I do now. So now let's go to number 50. This is another small publisher book. It is a book called Exit City, and it's from Mad Cave Comics. It's part of the London verse by Mark London. This was drawn by Carl Mostert, who very tragically died while he was working on the final issue of the series. The art in this was truly, truly phenomenal, and it's so sad to lose such a fantastic, talented person from the industry. Now, this is one of those books that I mentioned that I'm really happy that I do the show structured like I do, with books starting from the end of December, adding to their totals in the new year, because this only had 2 issues out in 2024 and 2 issues out in 2025. So I think a lot of lists would forget it, but I don't want to forget it. And so I'm counting the December issue in my recommendation index. So I just was so taken with this world. We have this guy, he's the best investigator in Exit City, which is a city that is off the coast of California, formed artificially in the middle of the ocean. And so it has some sort of extra legal rules that are not necessarily the rules that would be in the contiguous United States. And we have this police officer, and does he have a cybernetic companion that's influencing his thoughts and investigations? Is he just hallucinating? Is it a suggestion that's been planted sometime in his past, like a Wolverine or a Deathblow or a Rye? That is the main question here, as he gets paired up with an agent who maybe is not the cleanest agent, but has been pulled off of another force to be on the police force with him to investigate a murder. And so their murder winds up very tied up with his origin and why his brain works the way his brain does. Carl Mostert's art had a very frank quality to that, colored by David Barron and lettered by Dave Sharp. And then on the final issue, Ramon Villalobos takes over for Carl Mostert to finish up the series. Again, I loved a lot of the art. I love that it was grounded in reality, but that it had some kind of like fantastical, larger than life qualities. But I like a police procedural. I will not apologize. And I think that comics have a unique way to tell a police procedural story that is different than seeing it on TV. And I really appreciate when a comic really sticks to the procedural, has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and really solves the case for us, but also tells us something interesting about the characters. big fan, and Rexmo is pointing out that this series is on Global Comics. So if you have a Global Comics subscription, you can go and read it right now. Now we come to series number 49, and this is a series that got some hate in the market, I think because it established expectations that were not fulfilled, but I didn't go in with those expectations, and I freaking loved it. So this is TVA, The Time Variance Authority. It is a Marvel book written by Catherine Blair, who is one of the writers of the Loki series on Disney+, with art, actually I think the best art I've ever seen, from Perry Perez, and colors from Guru Effects, letters from Joe Sabino. A lot of people had some confusion about this book of like, it seems like it's kind of an MCU continuity, and I think that that's what it was sold on and why people got disappointed. It hinted that it was going to do some things that connected it to the MCU, and it had this Loki writer on it, so I think a lot of people had a lot of opinions. If anything, it's very much part of Gwen Stacy as Spider-Gwen's current continuity. It kind of fits somewhere on the before or after the first arc of her title that was concluded last month. Perez's art is so great here, and I the layouts, the character work, I just really think that there's so much joy to find in the art. And also, again, I like an alternate universe book that kind of grounds you in what's happening. So Time Variance Authority is trying to track down some kind of flaw that they're observing, and so they pull together a bunch of heroes that are kind of abandoned or interesting outliers in those worlds. So we have a Peggy Carter, we have a Gambit that has lost his rogue a long time ago. Eventually we pick up Jimmy Hudson, who has kind of been forgotten about in Marvel continuity, but is the Wolverine's son from the original Ultimate Universe. And as they try to investigate what's broken about the Time Variance Authority, they're starting to find along the way that it might be an internal problem, and they can't necessarily trust everybody internal to the Time Variance Authority as they go through their investigation. And when they finally figure out what it is and what was behind it all, it comes together in a really satisfying way that, like, to me, another thing I really love about a series like this is that it kind of ticks all the boxes and ties up all the threads. I'm somebody who really likes a complete story. I like a comic book that, you know, it's fine to leave some plot threads to pick up in the future, but I don't want to feel like the main part of the story left me with things unresolved, especially in a 5-issue miniseries. It has a Scarlet Witch that is very much meant to represent the MCU Scarlet Witch. I don't think you can read that literally, but she seems to have a very similar story to that, but she is not actually the character at the climax of this, and I just felt like the art from Perez just continued to escalate and escalate, that they just got cooler and cooler as things went on until we got to a very cool deep cut of the Dream Queen in the final issue. Next we have at 48, and this is a great example to me that all of these books feel like they could be in my top 10. When I was putting this list together, I did like a quadruple take of, is this really at 48? This really feels like one of my favorite books of the year, but there's just so many good comic books that it's 48, and I still highly recommend it. And that book is Red Hulk. Again, Benjamin Percy, when we get him away from Wolverine and we get him away from Ghost Rider, I really enjoy him, but you cannot take away that one of the things I'm really enjoying about this book is Jeff Shaw's artwork, which I think is the best I've ever seen from him in this book. Colors from Brian Valenza, letters from Corey Petit. And this has such an intriguing premise that really hooked me from the start, which is that Doom has Thunderbolt Ross under lock and key. And so he hasn't been Red Hulk for a while, and he hasn't been out for a while. And Doom has basically said, I am gathering together a brain trust to help me basically run war game scenarios of what could happen in the world in different scenarios where I come into conflict with different world powers or different superpowers. And Red Hulk thinks that's all that's happening, but we know as the reader that this is happening as part of one world under Doom. And so the reason Doom is gaming this out is that he is ruling the world on the outside of this prison. And so Red Hulk, really Thunderbolt Ross, because he has no gamma energy to become Hulk, wants to stage a breakout, and he breaks it out with two of the other people who are being used for this War Games exercise, Machine Man and Deathlock. It's really cool because it uses Red Hulk very sparingly, so it gives all of these characters room to be special and do their cool thing. And mostly they're fighting against Doom bots, but they know that if they draw too much attention, they're going to bring down Doom on them. And Jeff Shaw's art is just so phenomenal here. He used to have a much more scratchy and gawky quality to him, which I loved. That is not a knock, but he's drawing so cleanly and so boldly here, and I love that he's also doing the covers. I love his Doctor Doom, great colors from Brian Valenza, and I just love how specific his characters' faces and expressions feel as they do eventually break out, and now they've got to decide where are they going to go to fuel up Thunderbolt Ross so he can be Red Hulk, because as Red Hulk, Doom would have a hard time containing him. Still, though, with the fun of us as readers knowing that Doom rules this whole world, and they are not yet aware of that. So I'm a big fan of this book. It's been a lot of fun in every issue. And just as I was starting to feel like and starting to say, this book that's called Red Hulk doesn't have enough Red Hulk in it, we got to the point where we had some Red Hulk. And also, I just think the color choices from Brian Valencia here are absolutely phenomenal. I've really been enjoying every single issue of this book, which brings us to number 47. Number 47 is a book at DC that has gone through a writer change at the end of last year, and I'm still enjoying it almost as much as I was beforehand. It is Titans. This volume of Titans launched in 2023 with Tom Taylor, but instead of relaunching it after the end of Absolute Power, it transitioned to John Layman as a writer, a very famous indie writer that some of you will know from his Image series, with a whole rotation of artists. The primary artist is Pete Woods, and he really has established the look and feel and sometimes does his own colors. But we've had a variety of other artists here on this particular issue with Serge Acuna and Matt Herms on colors, and Wes Abbott is the letterer. The thing that I've really been liking about this Titans run in general, and John Layman's approach to it in specific, is this is the Titans as adults. They're not anybody's teen team. In fact, in a way, they're taking care of things much more directly on Earth than the Justice League is. But the other thing that I really like about this run is that John Layman is taking an approach where every issue is a story. I like runs where issues feel complete, and I feel like I got my money's worth, and they were substantial reads. And so the approach he's taking is he highlights individual stories, individual villains, individual conflicts on the team, and the big theme of this run is the Titans are not as together as they have been. They're starting to keep secrets, they're starting to have acrimony between them, and because of that, we're starting to see their effectiveness fracture. So as much as Titans is ever a story about found family, it's also a story about how if you start to keep secrets and if you start to not communicate with your family, then the power of that found family starts to break down. I think Pete Woods has delivered such iconic, beautiful characters. I am amazed that he colors himself. Another colorist that we've had on it, another artist, is Daniel Bayliss, has been an artist on it. Again, actually, he was coloring himself as well. I just really like that even when DC alternates artists, all of this art that I've shown you feels like it's of a piece. There's no point. This is maybe a little bit less saturated and pushed than the other issues, but there's really no point here where you go, wow, the artist changed. And I think DC is really good at that. And as somebody who doesn't have a long history with these Titans characters, I love that it's gotten me on board with the Titans characters that I know less. Like, I probably have the least experience with Donna Troy out of everybody on this team, just because of like the times that I haven't read comics, and yet I feel you know who she is. I'm rooting for her, or I'm on her side. I like that this has turned this not into just a Nightwing satellite book, which I think Titans often can be, because it's got Nightwing and he's a popular character and he's a very big force on the team. But both in the story and meta outside the story, Nightwing has really said, don't let me suck up all of the air in this room. And so it really feels like there's room for all of the characters to hold space in this comic and be forces in the plot. And I do enjoy that the Justice League tries to reprimand them a little bit, and they're like, we're not your kids anymore. So yeah, there you go. Seeing a lot of comments here that were not super specific to books, but I'm going to catch them as we go. D. Marcel chiming in for, I've lost count, we're on his 11th or 12th live stream with us right now. Ryan Wilson saying, think Perry Perez is an artist I feel has been doing a good job at Marvel. Yeah, I never have disliked a Perry Perez book, but that TVA book, maybe it was just the colors, I don't know, but it really felt next level to me. And I will say, I'll come right back to you, David C. I will say, Ryan, that Red Hulk, I mean, I read everything Marvel, so I'm not going to drop anything just because I see Percy's name, but I can certainly appreciate for somebody who's not buying the whole line, after the experiences we've had with Benjamin Percy the past few years, you kind of be like, I don't know about that. But I just think he's got a certain zone that he works better in, and I think you got to take. I think he's good at military stuff. I think he's good at stuff with a little bit of a charm and a funniness to it. And I think maybe just Wolverine and Ghost Rider is a bad fit. But then again, many people like those titles, so maybe they just weren't a good fit for me. There's a Jimenez drawn Titans Annual this week. I am not quite up to that yet. And Hank just saying that Pete Woods gets better and better. I agree. Like, I really don't have a lot of experience with him. I don't know what he's drawn before, but I am like giggling with delight every time I get to read a Pete Woods issue. Doom saying, hey, hello to everybody. Show me what I'll be buying in a couple of years when you catch up to it in trades and in omnibuses. And Edwin saying, I'm with you. Can't wait to see what Yunez does on that annual. Okay, let's continue. Oh, actually, one more thing about Titans is the big bad guy is going to be Deathstroke. How can it not be? He's kind of their feature villain. But I like that, again, it doesn't feel like it's just Deathstroke, and it doesn't feel like all these villains are too small ball to fight one at a time. Each one of the villains on this page has had an issue focus, and each of those issues have been very satisfying, and it's not felt like they were pumped up unnecessarily to make them seem threatening to the Titans. It just feels like it naturally worked, and that's a reason I'm a fan of this title. Okay, now we come to number 46, and this is a book that I think has gone under a lot of people's radars. It's called In Bloom, and it is from Boom Studios, written by Michael Conrad, with art from John J. Pearson, with some art assist from Lola Bonato, and lettered by Pratt Brousseau. This is such an interesting concept, and I think the concept drew me in, and then the fact that it's also a well-done police procedural kind of kept me stuck in. So this is a world where people are turning into botanical versions of themselves. And instead of just becoming botanical zombies, they're still occasionally productive members of society. And so the idea of blooming starts to become a very positive quality that people are actually seeking out. And so over time, it starts to become weird if you haven't had your bloom. But there's some question as to whether everybody who has bloomed has some kind of sinister hive mind quality to them that actually is not good for the humans in this world. And so we focus on one particular police detective as he is trying to track down one particular crime that's happened in this world. And he is one of the rare baseline humans that's left. But as he digs and digs into this world of people who are floral people, he's finding that it's actually much more connected than he thought. Not only all of them connected to each other, but also connected to him and his own past. And so he has one simpatico partner who has bloomed, and it's about the two of them trying to find their way through this world. And there's a lot of like little funny, not funny in a hilarious way, but little social commentary along the way about this mutation becoming a positive thing. So this is a reality show where somebody has like turned into a potted plant, and they're like, who's gonna bloom next? With no blooms taking place, no one has earned immunity. And I like that it wasn't broadly a funny book, but they got in some comic strict about the nature of our reality TV obsessed world, the nature of kind of trends and memes taking over what we know to be good or healthy for us. But it never became just a Mark Russell commentary book. It just is very much a book about these kind of like they're not zombies, they're creepy plant people, and the detective work between them. So I really, really enjoyed it, and the art was just crazy wild. I like this art that kind of leans a little bit towards more photorealistic, and it also is just very, very scary, really viscerally scary at points in ways that I really love. Here's his detective partner, who just has one tiny flower on her head, fight against somebody who is a giant pitcher plant. Reaper XC asking if TVA is a successor to Exiles. I was kind of surprised that it wasn't named Exiles, because it felt very Exiles to me. I think they didn't want to introduce Gwen Stacy into the Exiles brand, even though we've already previously had Captain Carter, I think, was in the last Exiles run, because I think that was going to create some brand confusion for them, and so they decided to stick with TVA, which is kind of like the MCU version of the Exiles brand, I guess, but it very much did feel like an Exiles book, if you like Exiles books. All right, now we are to number 45. Oh my gosh, we're only a quarter of the way through. Number 45 is another DC book, Are You Sensing a Trend? This is Green Lantern Corps. Now, I'm a big Green Lantern Corps fan. I've enjoyed it much more than I generally enjoy a solo Green Lantern book in the past. This is written by Jeremy Adams, but I think what a lot of people are missing in their commentary about this book is that he's got a co-writer on it, and she's frequently credited as the top billed writer, and that's Morgan Hampton. They had the opening 3-issue arc by Fernando Pasarin, and there is no one other than Fernando Pasarin that I primarily want to see drawing Green Lantern stuff. I absolutely loved him. He was inked by Eau Claire Albert and colored by Arif Prianto. The letters here are by Dave Sharp. I love this because we're in a universe right now where the Corps has been reassembled, but there are some problems with the emotional spectrum. It's not as united as it once was, and so there's people cropping up with emotional powers around the universe that are not necessarily connected to a ring, and so they need to be connected to their particular color of ring and their particular battery, or they need to have those powers removed from them because they're using them in wild and unpredictable ways. What I really enjoy about this is that it's got a whole cast, and so there's a lot of different things that can happen, and it feels very episodic. We're looking at Jon Stewart fighting a fight. We're looking at what happened to the planet of Thanagar. We're going on a training mission with these people. The first 3 issues were so big and epic, and again, nobody does space stuff as well for me as Fernando Pasarin. It makes me feel like I'm watching a Star Wars movie. But then we shifted focus to something that was like a little bit more fun and a little bit more of a madcap adventure with some of the Green Lanterns in training, and that was drawn by V. Ken Marion and MLK Nalpon in issues 4 and 5. To me, it's all good stuff. I really, really like the focus on the core. I like that it's able to shift tones and that we're just going to get all of their episodic adventures throughout the multiverse. Well, not the multiverse, just the universe. And I really just felt that it was easy for me to read. A lot of times with Green Lantern Corps, I don't know who every single one of them is and all of their names and what all of their histories are. And this book does a good job of catching me up as not of an experienced Lantern reader, but I still think it has a lot of deep lore that a lot of Lantern readers probably will appreciate. I just think it's been a really enjoyable book. Fantastic covers. Even when he's not doing the interiors, Fernando Parsaran is still doing the covers. Now we come to issue number 44, I'm so used to saying issue on the pull list, series number 44. And this is from Image Comics. It's from the Ghost Machine imprint. It is called The Rocketfellers, written and created by Peter J. Tomasi, with art and co-creation by Francis Monopool, colors from Monopool as well as John Callis, and letters from Rob Lee. This is such an easy book to recommend. I think there are so many people that would love it. It's got a very Fantastic Four vibe, and the art from Monopool, it's such a pleasure to see him drawing a regular monthly comic again because his art is so wonderful. But the idea is that it's a very Fantastic Four vibe, but it's a different story than the Fantastic Four. These people originated in the future in the 25th century. For some reason, they come into conflict with kind of the police force of the 25th century, and because of some technology that they've discovered, so they escape through time to our modern day. And so we're seeing these two parents, their two kids, and the granddad, who are all used to being in a world full of technology, full of cybernetics, kind of trying to adapt and lay low in our present day. They still do have some communication with their friends and family in the future, but they've got to limit that because they have a very creepy person chasing them through time. So here you see kind of a riff on the classic Bart Simpson gag of him having to write when he gets in trouble on the chalkboard in the classroom, but the kid in this family just programs his, laser pen to do it and then syncs all the laser pens up with each other. But meanwhile, we have this creepy time cop going through time to try to figure out what century they've escaped to, and we're starting to learn that there's something to the time travel aspect here that is greater than just what these people did, which is jump back to one specific time. Really fantastic art, really fun and family friendly, and the thing that I think will be a positive for some people and a negative for other people is that it's not just an arc book. Like, Tomasi and Monopool take time to do side stories. They take time to have the family buy a Christmas tree. They take time for a caper with the dog. So it feels like there's a lot of plot to get to here, but it's not just like it has the confidence of a book that's going to be going on for a while. So it doesn't feel like it's just hurrying through, but it also doesn't feel decompressed. The issues feel like they're delivering an appreciable amount of plot. They take time to read, but they don't all feel like they're just on the myth arc all of the time. I'm going to catch up with a couple of your comments before we keep going. Pete Woods has been an underling talent for years. His work on Lex and Action Comics was great. Unsung, with correction there. Bunk asking if we got to the part where I finally profess my love for Namoon is Following Us, but have we actually gotten to Mouse Guard yet? No, we're so low on the list so far. Hank saying Parsaran is a force. Had an interaction with him on Instagram about art, and he was the nicest. There are a few artists, I have so many favorite artists that we talk about every week, but there are a few artists that just make me sit down and shut up and have my jaw drop, and Parsaran is one of those artists. Reaper XC wasn't really into it in Bloom. The concept was okay, but I didn't enjoy the execution. You know what? There was a slowness to it in the middle of issues 3 and 4 that kind of put me off a little bit, but I think it resolved in a really satisfying way to me, and I'm glad that I stuck with it. But I do think a lot of 5-issue miniseries, it's hard to keep that level of excitement through all 5, and I think they do sometimes get a little bit of middle chapter syndrome. And Reaper drawing a connection with The Beauty from Image, which is actually on my list of runs that I want to read all of that I've only read some of. Saying hello to William Lee. Ryan Wilson also chiming in that he loves Parsaran. Okay, let's keep going through more of this absolutely beautiful Monopool art and come to number 43 on the countdown. Number 43 is a series that was in my top 10 last year, and I think it's just one of these series that's having a little bit of a softer second arc than the first arc that is a little bit more cerebral, which is not a surprise from this writer because it is Kieran Gillen, one of my absolute number one favorite artists, or I should say writers, but writers are artists in the industry, joined by Casper Wingard on art and Clayton Cowles on letters. It is power fantasy from Image comic books. Now, I can give you the exact pitch for if you're going to like this book. Do you love X-Men, and especially like Quiet Council, Krakoa era X-Men, and you thought, I don't want to see the away team of the X-Men. I don't want to see punching. I just want to stick with the drama that the Omega level mutants make with each other as they try to keep the mutant world at peace. This is Kieran Gillen basically taking things that he wanted to do with that in Immortal X-Men and spinning it off into its whole own universe. So in this world, there's people, we could call them mutants, but they're just people with powers, but there are only a very slim number of them that have powers that could change the world, and they are in a constant balance with each other. They have factions from each other, and they are constantly trying to move around and manipulate each other to get more power, but they have to stay in this constant state of balance, because if any one of them had too much power, the whole world would be at risk. The first trade of this was absolutely stellar. Every issue was a 5 out of 5. This one goes a little bit softer, but it does pull out a very interesting magic trick in that Gillen at the end of the first trade pretty much outlines the full history of this world, and he says explicitly which issues will be dealing with every explicit historical event. So he goes full Hickman data page, and this arc is filling in those historical events. So it's perhaps a little bit less satisfying in the present day, but if you're somebody who loves that kind of data page approach, if you love that kind of, we're going to piece together the history of the world, this is a great book for it. And Casper Wingard's art is just so amazing. We look at what they refer to as the second summer of love, which is one of these extra dimensional entities came to the earth in the end of the 80s and thinks they're going to bring peace to everyone, but it turns out to be a disaster for everyone. So we also took a look at the relationship that these superpowers have to heaven and hell. Are there canonical heavenly forces and demonic forces in this world? Is there canonical magic? And so we're not just looking at mutants, we're looking at people who have all different kinds of superpowers. My secret weapon on this series, and because I am a crazy person, is I screenshot every single page, and then I have a master PDF that I keep that I have all of the pages in the chronological order that the events are revealed for the universe. So if in issue 9 we see a scene from 1955, I screenshot that and I put it in order of 1955. And every time a new issue comes out, I go and I page through my complete in order continuity Bible of the power fantasy. The first trade of power fantasy is absolutely peak 100% great comic book making. And you know what? I think the book has earned a slightly more introspective second arc based on the strength of that first one. David C. saying he has a letter published in Power Fantasy number 10. Ryan Wilson going back a book saying, I want to get into the Ghost Machine universe. I've read some of it, enjoyed it, and they have great artists and writers. I really like it. It's hard to find the time to read it right now. Also, I hugely admire how they've launched a whole multiverse of stories, but I do think they made it kind of hard to understand. When I did a guide for it on Crushing Krisis, I had to spend a couple of hours like looking at all the books, making notes, looking at the Wikipedia page, looking at their Ghost Machine Zero to kind of figure out how it all works. So all those lines relate to each other, and we actually get a glimpse in Rocketfellers that some people can see across that multiverse. But there's the Geiger line of the Unnamed, which explicitly has Redcoat in it. Then there's the Rook Exodus universe that isn't connected to the other ones yet. Then there is Hyde Street, which is its own thing. And then there's also Rocketfellers, but then there's also Hornsby and Halo, and it's not clear if Hornsby and Halo is the same universe as Rocketfellers because it's also written by Tomasi. Just a little bit confusing. Yeah, y'all need to get on Power Fantasy. Jamie C47, a book I've only read the first trade. I can't wait to read more, I bet is something you would say. Richard Fearing is saying hello to me in chat, jumping late, hoping all are well. I'm sure I've discussed this upcoming Fall of the House of X. Nope, this is not focused on anything like that. This is just focused on the books that are out so far this year. Okay, let's go to series number 42. And this is a Marvel book, and it's a Marvel book that, I don't know, if you haven't been reading them, it might kind of surprise you to hear what it has been like and what it has been about. It is Storm, from Maria Aldel, art from a variety of different artists, but at the beginning by Lucas Wernick and then by Luciano Vecchio, colors from Alex Guimarães and Fuentes Sujo, letters from Travis Lanham. What's really interesting about this from Aldel is it's a big, big swing. A lot of people writing Storm are like, she should just deal with weather. Or she should go to Africa and work out the peace between the people where she came from, or she should have adventures in Egypt. Maria Eldel goes in a completely opposite direction and says, what if Storm was Phoenix? And that's going to be a turn on for some people and a turn off for some people. I think a lot of Storm fans in the comic book community are very focused on Storm's power. They want to see her be very regal. They want to see her have the most power. They want to see her do feats. This is a book that's very much attuned to them. I don't know that we needed to take Storm that big, but you know what? It doesn't matter what I wanted, because what we're getting is a very, very enjoyable story. It's a gorgeous story, and it shows Storm that in a world where she's separated from just being an X-Men or Avenger, it's a hard world to navigate because everybody wants to put up blockades. They want to all negotiate from her. They want something from her. They want to control her body. They want to control how she controls the weather. They want to control her relationship to the Earth. And this story kind of shows how hard it is for Storm to be in the middle of that, even as she is being tapped by a galactic force even bigger than her to have even more power. And how does that change how she relates to and how she's willing to tolerate all of the things that get in her way on the Earth. We had a brief tie into the X-Manhunt nonsense crossover where Storm actually winds up getting her cosmic powers and facing off against all of Cyclops' team. And so then we also have Maggot kind of be turned into Omega Maggot. So we're starting to build a little bit of a group of people around Storm, but there's definitely this feeling that this is about all the things that slow Storm down. And towards the end of the series, we get that very, very literally as Storm has to deal with an FBI investigation where she is made to bring briefcases full of paperwork there. And so how do you get out of that situation with your cosmic powers? Really a fun book to read, and you don't have to be reading the rest of the X-Men line. You don't have to know anything that it's about going on with X-Men. You don't have to have read Krakoa. This is probably the most standalone book, I would say, that is satisfying all on its own of the entire X-Men line. One Wheelchair X saying, it's a shame Warnicka's done with Storm with issue number 10. Reaper, I explained at the start with the top 60 here that it was just arbitrary. As we were getting to book 61, 62, 63, I just was feeling like I didn't have as many books that I could strongly recommend, so I cut it off at 60. At one point it was 50, but I found 10 more books I wanted to talk about. On Near Mint Condition, the Tiger Eye stuff, that is just that had been established by Tiger Eyes, I think, back in 2015 or 2016, where it used to just be a top 50, and then one year he gave the next 10, and then it kind of just regularized at 60. So it's just actually a coincidence that this is 60 and that is 60 as well. Now we come to book number 41, and this is a completed miniseries that tied in with the main series, but I found incredibly satisfying all on its own, and it was the Justice League, The Atom Project. This was written by Ryan Parrott and John Ridley, with art throughout from Mike Perkins, colored by Adriano Lucas, who I love, and letters from Wes Abbott. This spins out of the end of DC All-In, and it ties into Justice League Unlimited, the current Justice League book. But actually, I think it tells all of the stories of that so much better than any of those books are doing. So what this basically does is it's a story set in two different time periods. It's set a little bit in the past and currently in the present. And we find out that in this world where all of the powers have been unmoored from the people who had them, the metas in the DC Universe parlance, Captain Atom has shown the ability to attract and even absorb and even disperse those powers to other people. So he kind of works as a little bit of a magnet, but also a distribution center that can help right the wrongs of all these powers going to the wrong places if our two atoms can figure out how to work with him. That's the past story. In the present, we find that Captain Atom has gone rogue. The U.S. military is after him. He's powered up a number of U.S. military soldiers, and they want him to keep doing the powers, but he is feeling like he is going to explode. And when the book starts, we don't know why he might explode. And so we go through these two timelines and parallel to each other. So as we learn more about the investigation that the Atoms are doing in the past to try to use him to absorb and redistribute the powers, we find out more about why in the present day he thinks it might be better if he could just die. He says, I figured my death could matter more than my life, and thankfully fate had other plans. So we see that journey through this. This winds up tying in a little bit to the We Are Yesterday event that happens in Justice League and World's Finest, but actually it tells it in a very contained way. You don't have to be reading either of those other books. And actually, I think the story is a lot more compelling here than it was in other of those places. I had a little bit of doubt about this book around issue 2-3. Like, was it going to get through all that it wanted to get through? Were the timelines going to come together? But I have to say, I had a really enjoyable time, and ultimately by the end felt very safe in the hands of Ryan Parrott and John Ridley, because they put it together in a way that really came to reach a satisfying conclusion. And I absolutely loved Adriano Lucas coloring Mike Perkins. I hate when people color him too flat. Sometimes talk about people who have too much shininess on their colors. With Perkins, I actually think it is really important to have this kind of edge lighting, this kind of thing to show the three-dimensionality of his work, because I think when other artists color him too flat, it almost looks like cardboard cutouts moving around on the page. I really enjoyed this. I happen to think these characters are cool. I have literally 0 issues and 0 history reading about the Atoms or Captain Atom, but they've always seemed cool to me. So this was just one of these things where I got to be like any other reader that doesn't read thousands of comic books here and go, I'm just going to jump in and see if I like it. And I liked it a lot. And just Dr. Light was involved. I really think it made a great use of the cast and a really great use of the backdrop of the current Justice League. And there we see Gorilla Grodd in a very, very cool panel from Mike Perkins, colored by Adriano Lucas. All right, folks, that brings us to the end of a third of this, and we're an hour in, so I think you can surmise just how long this is going to be, although I feel like we're getting into a little bit more of a rhythm now. So let me just open up my next set of PDFs, and we will continue. If you wanted to ask some questions, now would be the time to get into the chat. Okay, let me just close some windows and open some windows here as we get from number 40 down to number 31. All right, let me open my credits. Here we go. All right. Am I ranking single issues or the entire series? These are entire series ranks. If you've joined us midway through, I've read just about every comic book series from Marvel and DC, or at least sampled series from Image, IDW, Dark Horse, Mad Cave, and a lot of like kind of totally independent stuff as well. And so these are all of the comic book series with at least 3 issues out between December 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025 that I could heartily recommend. They're numbered in the order that I would recommend them, but everything I'm talking about in the show is a book I truly like, and I want to try to connect you to books that you might love as well. Doom saying, random and unrelated chat, do we know what Hickman's doing after Ultimate Spider-Man? It's a mystery. It's a mystery. Okay. Ryan Parrott was Bunkmaster's favorite Power Rangers writer. I think he does an excellent job of really keying in on great character stories and making you care about them as people. And that is what I've been finding with his, what am I trying to say? With his work on another title as well that maybe we will get to. Try not to give any spoilers. All right, number 40. This is a book that many of you have been reading and loving. It is Zatanna from DC Comics. It is drawn and written and colored from Jamal Campbell. It is lettered from Ariana Maher. The reason I really love this book is because Jamal Campbell is an artist who you can just stare and appreciate every single page. And some artists, when they write for themselves, they don't know how to give themselves things that will be impressive and use their skills to the max. Jamal Campbell knows how to use his skills to the max, and that comes through on every page of this book. I also love that even though it's set in the present day of Zatanna and it's set in the current world of DC, this really could be read anywhere, and it seems like Zatanna series that could fit anywhere in continuity, like last year's Eisner winner, Bringing Down the House, play really well to the public and have an evergreen status. I think this absolutely will become evergreen, and we'll be talking about it for years to come, not only because it's great artwork from Jamal Campbell, but it's a really good story that's core to how Zatanna's powers work and her history of magic. So early on in the series, she gets impaled with this magical sword that makes her powers go haywire, and it makes every time she casts a spell hurt. And it's people who want to suppress her from doing magic so they can get their evil plot on. And Zatanna realizes sometimes to do good, you've got to hurt yourself a little bit, but she also eventually figures out what is going on with that sword. So I just think the artwork has been incredible, and it's also not hard to follow. I think a lot of artists like Jamal Campbell, who put so much art on the page and don't play with a lot of contrast, sometimes the foreground of their art can get so lost in the mix, but Jamal Campbell's layouts and composition are so strong that I never feel lost. Even on a page like this, there's a lot of color on this page, and the contrast is not helping you figure out the story because the contrast is not really separating the foreground from the background that much in these panels, but because of the way he lays it out, it's easy to figure out this zigzag through the page, and it's easy to figure out what's happening on each of the panels because of the way he moves the camera. He's such an extraordinary artist. I'm really, truly here for anything that he does, and I think it was just a brilliant, brilliant team up to have him drawing Zatanna because it's absolutely the amount of magic I want to see wielded in her world. Jamie C47 saying it was a great beginning to end with beautiful art and paneling and really had me connecting with Zatanna. James the Media Master, hello to you, saying a good superhero book to read if you need a palate cleanser. is Astro City, which I can't take out right now because I've got some Epic collections in front of it, but they're right here. And coming up next, my next off-schedule stream, although it might be a few weeks from now, is going to be the top runs I most want to sit down and read, or in some cases finish or reread, and Astro City is absolutely on that list. I really like indie superhero books. I think they're a good palate cleanser from the big two stuff. We're going to be talking about another one later, so I will hold my tongue on that, but I will always try an indie comics superhero. I think I just like superhero as a medium, and I don't think DC and Marvel are the only two people who can do superhero. But of course, Reaper is taking the perspective of like, well, what about non-superhero palette cleansers like God Country, a book that is very close to my heart. It's the book that I read on the plane from the United States to New Zealand. Bunk, you will find that a lot of the comics that we were talking about today were comics that were in my top 10 at some point. I think it's easy for something to be in a top 10 when I was only using 2 issues to rank things into the top 10, because it's really great to have it's really easy to have a 5-star first issue and a 4-star second issue, and then you've got 4.5 stars and you're in the top 10. It's hard to maintain that level of excitement through a series, but all of these are so high in my recommendation index that they've never really fallen into disrepair or distrust, and the ones at the very tippity top are truly ones that I have been like 5 or 4.5 in every issue, and I have a natural bell curve of ranking distribution, so the 5s and the 4.5s that I give out of 5 are scant. They are not frequent, and that's not intentionally. That's the way I've always rated. I always give a pretty even distribution of ratings. So like, these are books that were like a 5 and a 4.5 and then like a 3.5, which is still a pretty darn good comic book in my world. I know some people don't like giving things under 4, but to me, anything down to 3 should still be a good comic book. Okay, let's talk about number 39, which I've got to catch up on my credits to see what to tell you it's going to be. Oh, perfect timing. This is the book that I've hinted at several times in the last couple of books. It is a new favorite of mine. It is called Rogue Sun. It is part of the Massive Verse, which is led by Radiant Black at Image Comics. But you know what? It stands all on its own, and you do not have to be reading the rest of the Massive Verse. This is written by Ryan Parrott, co-written by Nick Cotton, and it has alternating art, sometimes by Abel, sometimes by Bruno Frenda, sometimes both in the same issue, colored by Natalia Marquez, and lettered by one of my favorite letterers, Becca Carey. This is a brilliant indie superhero book. I could not recommend it any more highly. Every time I read an issue of it, I have a good time. I've never disliked an issue of it, and I didn't feel like I had to catch up all the way from number 1. I'm taking my time with it because every issue has such a great recap in it that it totally lets you know where you are with these characters. It's such an interesting world where in number 1, we find that this young man has inherited a super suit. It's kind of like a magical version of an Iron Man suit, and it's sort of like a Green Lantern ring in that way. And it contains the psyches of its past wearers. And in this case, the past wearer is his father. But there's some drama because his father had abandoned his family and moved on to start a different family. And so that family was aware of his adventures as a superhero, and they were kind of expecting that it was going to get passed down to one of them. So a lot happened in the 24 issues to get us to the beginning of this year, which I haven't read, but the recap pages have caught me up. And so now there's actually 2 different Rogue Sun suits, and both he and his stepsister have the suits. What's so interesting is these heroes are based in New Orleans, and they are fighting against anything that could threaten the city or the world in general. And so they're fighting against a lot of supernatural threats, and so there's a lot of recurring vampires and werewolves and stuff, but they also are fighting against kind of like Norman Osborn type of CEO bad guys as well. And what we're really seeing is that it's a book that really gives me Spider-Man or Miles Morales vibes, where it's like a young hero coming to terms with their powers. And even though these 2 people shared a father and they share suit technology, they have very, very different approaches to how to be heroes, especially because they're being advised by 2 different people. The main character has his father whispering in his ear in his suit, but his stepsister has a previous Rogue Sun from the 13th century whispering in her suit. And he has a very different idea about what heroism ought to be, and so it's influencing the way they both develop as heroes. Renee Spawn saying, Rogue Sun has been my top read since number 1. I can't get over how satisfying it is. Every issue feels so thrilling and so complete to me, but yet they're all furthering the arc. And I think that's a really hard thing to do, to make issues feel complete, but also feel like they're contributing to an ongoing tale. And this book does it absolutely brilliantly. Really, really love the colors in it as well. Oh, and there's even more. I think I read more issues than I even realized. And by the way, those colors again are by Natalia Marquez. Okay, now we come to 38, and this is a book of a franchise that I love so much, but I'm not really into the main book of that franchise, and so I've been possibly extra delighted by this side book, and it is ThunderCats Lost. It's from Dynamite Comics, is written by Ed Brisson with truly unbelievably outstanding art from Rafa Labosco, colors from Rashawn Curiciano, and letters from Jeff Eckelberry. And this has got sort of a Lost in Space quality to it to begin with, where the Thundercat ship of the Thundercats we all know and love kind of crash landed on its own. They were meant to start a society somewhere else, but they're on their own. And this book says, well, what about the other ships? What about the other people? Where were they stranded? How are they going to reconnect with the main Thundercats? And so we follow basically just an alternate version of the Thundercats. This group could have been the group that we've been following all this time, but the difference is they do not fall upon a planet that is mostly desolate. They fall upon a planet that is very much populated, and they have people very much in pursuit of them, and there's a society there for them to investigate and integrate into, which is very different than the Thundercats. There are people like on the planet for the main Thundercats, but it's much more of like a tribal state compared to a more developed technology. And the other thing is, much like with the main Thundercats, these people all have different roles in the cat society, and so they, which I get the Thundaran Society, that's what they're called, right? And so they don't have a natural leader amongst them. Now, in ThunderCats, it defaults kind of to Lino because he was meant to be one of the future people leading their whole society. But in this book, their ongoing conflict about who should be the leader becomes a really big part of the book. I just really love this team. I'm completely fascinated by the art. And as they get further into this local society and kind of tied up with them as they try to figure out what their role in this world is, I just find myself getting more and more invested. Superjob is saying it sounds like ThunderCats Elseworlds, but I do believe it is still part of the main continuity of ThunderCats, currently written by Declan Shalvey. It's much more like when Legion of superheroes split off into Legion Lost. Like this is literally ThunderCats Lost. It's the ThunderCats that are not with the main tribe of Thundercats. And just very many cool covers, as we also always know. But this Rafa Labosco art, I don't know who he is. I don't know where he came from. But Dynamite has discovered a gold mine here. And I really like all the character work Ed Brisson has been doing too. I just really, really appreciate this book a whole lot. And it's nice and early. It's only on issue 3. So you have an easy time catching up and jumping on. Okay, now we have a book that has really made me think, and it's by somebody who's so good at writing villains. It is Charles Soule, teamed with 2 artists I really love, Luke Ross and also Stefano Raffaele, both colored by Nolan Woodard, lettered by Joe Caramagna. It is Star Wars Legacy of Vader. So this follows the character of Kylo Ren in between sequel movies. I believe it is between episode 8 and episode 9. And he goes through a pretty big transformation there. But not only that, we just don't get a lot of texture in the movies about Kylo Ren. Like, he is literally the Prince of the Resistance. Have you thought about that? He's the next in line to kind of like take over the Resistance in terms of he's tipped for that. He's being trained for that. And then he goes over to the dark side and he becomes the chief of the First Order. But in a way, that's his heritage as well because of him being the grandson of Darth Vader. I don't feel like the movies really got into that so much. They kind of just played him as this very conflicted, whiny, emo guy. Maybe you feel that way, maybe you don't, but this book dives into the conflict. And the way that it finds that conflict is Charles Soule, who has written a brilliant Darth Vader series in the past, says what would happen in a world where Kylo Ren wants to start experimenting with learning more about Darth Vader's heritage. Because in this world, a lot of what we know about Anakin Skywalker's youth is still very much obscured. All of these characters in the Resistance, they don't know everything that happened in the prequels. So we see Kylo Ren trying to uncover that and connect with the fact of, is he Vader? Is he going to really take on the legacy of Vader and then also kind of extend the legacy of Snoke? And he is advised along the way by Vane, who is a comic book advisor, not seen in the films, of Darth Vader, who's kind of been keeping all of his heritage alive, hoping that Vader would come back. But Vane sees a possibility with the rise of a successor. I think Luke Ross does the best artwork of anybody who is drawing Star Wars right now, or at least I did think that until we moved on to Stefano Raffaele, who also has absolutely stunned me. Talk about 2 artists who are both top quality, who had a handoff that was seamless to me, even though their 2 works of art are not completely similar. A lot of that is down to Nolan Woodard, who is a colorist I really, really like. What I love about this is everything that Kylo Ren finds out about his past just deepens his own psychosis. You know, he goes to Tatooine and he finds out that Darth Vader started out as a slave. How could that be? He goes to Naboo and finds out that Darth Vader fell in love with a princess, and this planet ever since then has been conquered and reconquered again. How could that be? So this is just a great villain book. It makes me really think and reinterpret things I've known and assumed about Darth Vader's life and about what came from that in the legacy of the Empire and the legacy of the Star Wars galaxy so far, far away. And I'm just a massive, massive fan of this book. I look forward to it every single month. Yeah, and if you've watched my recent Polish shows, the way that it comes to a head on Naboo is Kylo Ren pits himself against himself. He basically threatens Naboo by saying, we're going to blow up your planet, so you better grow a spine. Because he wants to see this planet that's the planet of his grandmother kind of like actually become a place that will stand up for himself. But at the same time, he's on the ground helping them organize the rebellion. So is he going to blow himself up? Is his self-hatred that much? That self-hatred literally is his character. He's the Prince of the Empire and the Prince of the Rebellion. That is exactly why I love this series so, so much. Okay, now we are coming to number 36. This is a book that if you've been watching me from the beginning of this year, you saw in my top 10, and it didn't fall for my top 10 so much as there's just so many other good comic books, but I just think about this all the time. It's a book called Living Hell. It's by Caitlin Yarsky. She scripted it, she drew it, she colored it, and she did the covers. Clayton Cowles is the letterer. And I love Heaven and Hell stuff. It's a pretty easy win for me, and this concept charmed me from the jump. We have somebody who's a demon on Earth, and he's just trying to live his life, man. It turns out there's plenty of demons on Earth, and they've totally integrated with human society, and they aren't trying to do anything evil. They just don't want to live in hell. But this particular demon gets charged with getting other rogue demons who are doing bad things and collecting them kind of Ghostbuster style to send them back to hell. I don't know if I have seen any comic book this whole year where the cartooning was as expressive and easy to follow as from Caitlin Yarsky. Her paneling, her acting of her characters was so clear, so charming. I just got pulled into this world so much. And just when I thought that the thing I mostly cared about was the father and I just wanted to see him do his mission, I started falling in love with his daughter. His daughter who's just trying to live her life with no idea that she's got this hellish heritage and that her father's existence on this plane is at risk. And so it kind of shows their two stories separating and then converging. I just love the father-daughter stuff. I love the Agent of Hell stuff. And I love the realization that she comes to, which is sort of like a coming out story, but it's more of like a discovery story about discovering your heritage. Caitlin Yarsky is a super talent. I cannot wait to see more of her indie stuff. She just penciled an issue of Wonder Woman with Tom King, but I want to see her own ideas out there. This is a 4-issue series. It wraps up quite definitively, although there's a tickle that it could go on from there. And again, I don't know that I saw anybody cartoon with this level of expressiveness and clarity any other time during this year. I know this is ranked lower in my top 60, but you have to think my top 60 represents the top 15% of all comics I've read this year. So please do not look at this ranking in the 30 and be like, I could skip that one. If this looks attractive to you and if that story sounds cool to you, I pretty close to guarantee that you are going to like it. Okay, now we come to issue number 35 on the countdown, or I should say series 35, and this is going to involve a lot of scrolling for me because this series has been a weekly series with issues out almost every week of 2025 so far. If you watch my weekly shows, you know how much I love this book. It is Avengers Academy Marvel's Voices Infinity comic and is written by the absolutely brilliant Anthony Oliveira. This book is, I think, the queerest book on the stands, and it's not even on the stands, it's digital, every single month for Marvel, DC, or anybody else. But it's also the book with some of the best youth energy of anybody that's writing for any comic book right now. It just makes me so excited. It's not the traditional Avengers Academy that you might remember back from 2010. There's a younger cast of characters who've been introduced over the past couple of years, including Kid Juggernaut, Captain America of the Railways, Moon Girl, Red Goblin, who's sort of a kid Carnage, Bloodline, who is the daughter of Blade, Escapade, who is one of the new characters introduced in New Mutants over the course of the run of Krakoa, and it just has all of them under the tutelage of Captain Marvel and the other Avengers as a new Avengers Academy to try to just give them a little bit of shape and a little bit of safety as superheroes, to figure out their identities as superheroes, as civilians, and to figure out their identities very much about how they feel about about their who they are and who they love. And there's so many little funny bits along the way, but the bits never get in the way of spending time with these characters. Now, if this was from last year, I think I would have had this book a little bit higher. The reason it's a little bit lower this year is because it separated a lot of the characters into little singles and pairs to go through this kind of time travel arc. And you know, time travel exhausts me. So some of these issues, it's just harder for me to recommend because it doesn't have the exact magic that this book had at the beginning that made me fall in love with it for the first 30 issues. But the great thing is it's a weekly book. So as quick as that came, it quickly went away and we got to see these teams reunite. And over the course of it, it actually did things that I wound up really liking, which was refocused on the story of Arnie Roth, who is a gay character that was introduced by J.M.D. Mattis in the run of Captain America in the, I guess, late 70s or early 80s, that is canonical as one of his friends from New York that went on to be a soldier and in the war, you know, ahead of Cap joining the army. And so it fleshes out his history and how his legacy hits the modern day. It brings in Blackheart, Mephisto's son, in a way that I am completely obsessed with. And it does, so far, one of the best Doom stories that I've seen as this whole One World Under Doom, and it's happening in a digital Infinity comic. Also, it does a really cool future looking story, which is another thing that really exhausts me sometimes, because in this issue it did it in a way where it says, let's not time travel through the future, let's look through somebody's future like we just broke up with them and we're looking through their Instagram or their TikTok, but instead of scrolling backwards about what they've been going through, we're going to scroll forwards in their life. What a cool idea. Anthony Oliveira is full of cool ideas, and for a comic that comes out weekly, and these are not short little joke issues. Some of the digital issues of Marvel Unlimited are like, you know, if you were to print them on comic pages like It's Jeff, they'd be like a 4-page story, a 6-page story, maybe a 10-page story. These are basically 14 to 18 page stories every single week. I have learned to often joke that I subscribe to Avengers Academy Marvel's Voices and I get Marvel Unlimited as a bonus with my Avengers Academy subscription. It has had art by so many different people, including Pablo Collar, including Bailey Rosalund. It's often colored by KJ Diaz and is always lettered by Ariana Maher. No, that's actually a lie. It's also lettered sometimes from Joe Caramagna. We had Carola Borelli, Ruth Redmond, and I didn't show a lot of interiors here, only some of them that I thought really made good use of the vertical scroll. But all of the covers of this are drawn from the interiors. They don't have their own specific covers. So this is a good look at what the interiors look like. Here's their encounter with Doom. And all the way up to also totally recontextualizing Emplet from Generation X, which if you saw my pull list show this week, I'm completely obsessed with. I love this use of vertical scroll here, where we're seeing Bloodline run and we're almost like turning a scroll in front of our face, watching her run across the earth to get back home to save her mother. It's a series I love so, so much. And I hope if you have Marvel Unlimited, you will check it out so we can keep this book alive. I love the representation in every sense of the word representation, both the youth and the queerness of the book. Okay, now we're going back to the DC world for a book that I did not hear a lot about over the course of this year, and I don't understand why, because I was obsessed with it. This is Challengers of the Unknown, written by Christopher Cantwell, art from George Fornes, Sean Isaacs, M&K Nalpan, and some other people I think as well, colors from a whole host of people, including Romualdo Fajardo Jr. and Matt Herms, letters by Hassan Utsman Elhal. Now, you might be saying, uh-oh, that sounds like a mess. That sounds like too many colorists, too many cooks in the kitchen. But too many cooks. But no, that's not the case. The reason it works like this is because every issue sent one of the Justice League out with one of the Challengers of the Unknown. Why? Because at the end of Absolute Power and at the beginning of DC All In, Darkseid kind of comes and explodes and his energy is dispersed amongst the universe because Darkseid actually winds up going over to the Absolute Universe. But we find that the members of the Challengers of the Unknown, who are just working as basically the science crew of the Justice League Watchtower, are somehow infused with this Darkseid energy. And so the Justice League wants to kind of get them apart from each other and take them throughout the universe to follow their energy, but also to figure out what it is that this energy is and if they can be trusted on the Watchtower or just in general. And so what's really fun is it basically works like a Challengers team-up book where we get individual Justice Leaguers with the Challengers one at a time, and they all wear this cool kind of pinky purple costume as they go. So we get all the big leaguers on their own adventures as they are trying to figure out what is going the challenges, but each of the challengers in succession is having their powers explode, and they're not powered people, so these powers are somehow connected to Darkseid energy. The other thing I love is that Christopher Cantwell basically gave us a data page in every single issue that is not just a recap of what the story has been, but is Mr. Terrific making his scientific entries as we go of what is happening with these characters. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this was originally solicited to go one additional issue. Maybe I just am confused, but it seems like there's somewhere where this Challengers of the Unknown Darkseid energy arc is going that they weren't ready to commit to yet, that maybe is going to have to do with a later story a little bit further down the line with the League. But the great thing about this is it's a fun mystery book that reads well on its own. And a lot of the issues are just one-shot stories on their own, but you aren't going to get complete satisfaction at the end of it unless you're going to keep reading DC. So it does keep that caveat with it. Jean-Remy Argueta saying, I loved it. Criminally underrated. And I think the art switch-ups, usually I really don't like art switch-ups. I really thought that the art trade-offs on this really, really worked, and it helped with the storytelling. There are positive ways you can do art switch-ups and make it really work. Okay. Let's move on to number 33. We're cruising. We're at cruising speed now. Number 33 is a book that I love so much. You've heard me talk about my great affection for it so much. I'm so sad that it's over, but we will always have it. It is Spider-Boy, the boy without fear, in this case, because he was teaming up with Daredevil. It's written from Dan Slott, and most of the art of this was by Paco Medina with iconic colors from Eric Arsenita and letters from Joe Caramagna. I think the reason that this is so high, and at points this was in my top 20, was because up to this point, it was kind of doing a series of individual stories or little 1- and 2-shot stories, which I like, and I really enjoy when books did that. But Dan Slott leaned into one big Daredevil arc here, so we could tell a little bit of a larger story that wasn't just connected to Spider-Boy's origin, which I think a lot of the first 12 or 13 issues of this book were, and though that story that was a little bit longer with Daredevil just yielded so much more fun. It allowed him to introduce so many more kid characters. It brought him into conflict with somebody other than just Spider-Man. So Daredevil has to enter a tag team tournament for control of a particularly deadly ninja clan, but the tag teams have to be with a adult hero or villain of some kind and their young protege, and so he recruits Spider-Boy to do it. This is the introduction of Spider-Girl, who Dan Slott writes as a delicious little brat, and her flashback scenes to her origins are drawn by, hold on, I'm trying to get to it. Oh no, I can't find who drew her flashback scenes. Sorry. But that is part of this as well. And also we had some art from Nathan Stockman as well. So that was a really, really fun arc. And it just had everything charming about this book, but kind of took a little bit longer. And then we got the final few issues of Spider-Boy back in New York, and Dan Slott kind of putting all the toys back in the toy box and leaving us with a status quo where we could trust that he can move on to whatever he's going to be used for next. I don't know if anybody's going to use this character as successfully as this book. Yes, it's a young hero book, but it's not just an all ages book, although I absolutely would give it to kids of any age. I don't think any of Dan Slott's typical mean-spiritedness was in this book at all. It was truly him having fun, and it shows how much fun it is to see Dan Slott having fun. And I just really love this book. I have a great affection for this character. I hope somebody else uses him and uses him well in the future. Okay, and we ended up with a nice little team up with Spider-Man, which was very, very pleasing to wrap up the series. Now we come to issue number 32, or I should say series number 32. Some of you are going to be surprised about how low this is. Some of you are going to be surprised about how high this is. But I thought long and hard, and this is where it comes. It is Absolute Martian Manhunter by Dennis Camp, art from Javier Rodriguez, letters by Hassan Otsman-Elhal. So here's the thing. This first issue is one of the best issues I've ever read. It got to me on such a intrinsic, personal level that I wrote a song about it, that I did live on one of my Polish shows. I have not stopped thinking about the first issue. It's a staggering work. I think the first issue doesn't necessarily represent where this book is going because it was more philosophical, and then we've got to lean into what the Martian Manhunter is. So if you haven't been following Absolute Universe, it's a DC universe where the development of heroism and powers has been delayed and hope has been sapped from the world. And in this case, we don't get John Johns as our Martian Manhunter who came to the world the way we know when he did in DC continuity. He has been lingering in the back of the brain of this FBI agent. Or is he really just somebody with dissociative personality disorder? Or has he been a Martian all along? So it's a lot about his identity and confusion. And also, is the city just experiencing a heat wave? Are people actually just turning against each other in the modern day? Or is there a white Martian tampering with the powers of the sun and influencing people to try to kill each other? I think for me, this is a book that is so much more about the writing of and about the art as well from Javier Rodriguez. There's no one else who could be doing what he is doing here. Nobody else in comic books. But the great thing is that the art tells the story of fractured identity, the story of a fractured narrative, the story of being unsure of what's in front of you being real or not. I do think it got a little tangled up with introducing us to the idea of the Martian inside of the head of this character, but now that's been established, it kind of is a dual inner monologue for him as he continues to experience the world both as an FBI agent but also in his house. And so in his mind he's wading through all this colorful battle and landscape in his front lawn, and then his wife looks out and he's just walking through the flowers and the grass like some kind of weirdo. But that really appeals to me, and I think that's why this book connects to me on like a deep level, because it goes to show that like we're all weird in our own brains, and there's always some inner struggle, there's always some inner hurdle we're stepping over in the front lawn that other people can't fully express. And when you have a connection with people, they can see the emotion, they can see the story that your fight in your eyes. But when we don't let people into our worlds, we start to lose that connection, and they start to lose the understanding of what we're going through. And I think that very human element of this book is my favorite thing about it, even though it's a book about a world with a Martian in it. And I just think there's something really real, raw, and personal to the story and the way that it is being told here. Here's that page. She says, you know, you've never been one to show your emotions. I never needed you to be. All I had to do was look into your eyes, and it's like I could read your thoughts, your feelings, like they're all written in a language only I could read. That's why before now I never doubted our marriage, doubted how you feel about me and Tyler. And he says, you doubt how I feel about you? You know, of course you. And to me, that human element of the book is why even though I'm frustrated with some aspects of it, I can't truly say any negative vibes about it, because I think it's doing something very stunning and unique that would work perfectly as an indie comic and not even needing to be in the DC line. Superjob walked right into my trap. Wasn't sure if I was really going to put this in the top 60. It fell out of my top 10, but the issue number 1 and also issue number 4 were so good that my frustration with issue number 2 just could not drag it down. Paul Gundam says, I love this character, but it seems like it's hard to keep a single series going. This series, though, is such a big hit and was such a big sellout and is outselling so many other comics in the industry that it actually got extended from 6 issues to 12 issues. Now, who knows what the long-term plan in the Absolute Universe is, but maybe the energy of how much people are liking this series can be brought back into the main DC universe. I don't know. I think selling this green guy who's a Martian, you know, in the main DC universe is a hard sell for people to get excited about. And there's been some cool Martian Manhunter books over the past couple of years, but this is just doing something that is so easy to step into from block number 1. I was talking to my friend Felix about it, and I was like, actually, it kind of almost feels like Moon Knight. Like it's almost like a Moon Knight story, not only because of his multiple personality issue with the Martian being in his head, but because he's doubting the veracity of his reality because he doesn't know if he can trust his own brain to tell him the truth. He's kind of in a dispute about if he himself is a reliable narrator to himself. Bugmaster B saying, I'm not entirely sure I expected this one to be here. I love this book way past the first issue, but I like camp in a way that I very much do not. I kind of find my disappointment with issue number 2 would tank the rating irreparably. It almost did, but issue number 4, this scene, I know I read it on the pull list just like I read it here. This scene and the cosmic explosion of his realization that she doubts his love for her, that's what appealed to me in the first issue, and that's what the Martian stuff in issue 2 and 3 was keeping me away from. I think if this was just going to be a 6-issue series, I was never going to like it because it was going to try to have to do too much. I think extended to 12 issues and with more time for this human aspect of the plot to hopefully play out, that's much more attractive to me. That's what made the first issue so stunning to me. John Remy saying, also the issue and his wife says she can't understand his language anymore. Beautiful. Yeah, you guys could always be one ahead of me because I'm still catching up. I am only up to July 2nd in my reading now. And now we come to number 31. This is a book that you've heard me loving on all this year. It just wrapped up, and it wrapped up in strong suit. It is Deadpool by Cody Ziegler with art from Roge Antonio as well as by, let's credit the other artist. Oh no, who's the other person? I will get to it eventually as I scroll through the credits that I have saved here, because the art team on this book has been spectacular. Andrea DeVito is the other one. It's consistently colored by Glitter EFX and it is lettered by Joe Sabino. The great thing about this year's worth of Deadpool issues is it's just hit hits. After an arc that established Ellie, Deadpool's daughter, as kind of filling in for him while he's presumed dead, which was the end of 2024. Great arc, loved it. One of my favorite Deadpool arcs of all time. We start off the year with Wade Wilson being back, and we finally get to see some father-daughter action. And if you're the kind of person who is a little bit skeptical about a legacy character being brought in and like made into a hero, me too. But Ellie is not just turned into the typical fourth wall breaking Deadpool murderbot. Here she's very specifically a very individual and unique character that adds so much fun texture to the world of Deadpool. And we go right from him being back and learning how to interact with her. Also, their Deadpool and daughter's not assassin agency, that's not fair, let's call it a mercenary agency, is co-chaired by Taskmaster in what is one of the most delightful turns from Taskmaster. He's kind of, he's not a great person, but he's just so likable here. And I think that even though he's a villain and we see him fight the Avengers, I like a version of Taskmaster that's like a little bit lovable. But then we go right into a crossover with Miles Morales. The way I do my algorithm, the Miles Morales issues are credited specifically to that series. I don't credit them also to Deadpool, but I loved every issue of the crossover, so that even made this book like even better. The art was so well tracked and so easy to follow. The fights, even though it's very easy to have a fight with a bunch of math characters that all look the same. So we had Miles's clone guy brother, we had both of the Deadpools, we had one of the young women that has powers that's in Miles's book, all kind of tossing each other back and forth in alleyways, and yet it was really easy to follow the action all throughout, and it was like really, really satisfying. And then after that slam bang thing, we come back to seeing and here's just examples of that. Like, every page of action was so easy to follow. It outlined the characters. So the artists on these books, Andrea DeVito and Roge Antonio, are just outstanding artists. And then we came back to what opened this book back in its first arc last year, which is this fight against Death Grip, who has it out for Deadpool and is almost impossible to kill because he's kind of gotten the power of the Murasama blade integrated with him. And so Deadpool, Taskmaster, and Ellie have to come all together to try to defeat him. It was a great book from beginning to end. It's so much fun. It's as much fun as I've had with Deadpool in many, many years. I really think this is going to go down as a memorable Deadpool run in a way that there's been good runs. I like the Scotty Young run. I like the Alyssa Wrong run. But I think this is the best run we've had since the first half of the Duggan run. Okay. Our super job starting to notice the balance between DC and Marvel. Will that balance keep us up as we continue? But let me say something about balance. DC does not have as many books on the market as Marvel. So even if, and I don't have the number in front of me, so I don't know if this is the case, even if they had the exact same number of books in the top 60, that means DC would be represented more proportionally in the top 60 because Marvel puts out almost twice as many books as DC. Okay, and that, just a couple more. The art and the colors. I never thought of Guru EFX as somebody whose books I would read just for the colors, but over the course of this book and also the course of Wolverine and Deadpool, he has become that kind of person to me. Okay, let me briefly pause the share as I load up the next PDF as we crack into the top half of our countdown of my favorite 60 books, series I should say, of this year. All right. I'm so happy the computer hasn't crashed. I guess I'd be jinxing myself. Knock on wood. But let's keep going. All right. Now we come to number 30. And this is a book that I had to catch up on because I didn't really understand what it was about or if I should be reading it or if it was in continuity. And over the course of this year, I've fallen in love with Batman and Robin Year One by Mark Waid and Chris Samney, who I think I called Samsey earlier in the stream. The tongue, it is tied early in the morning. This is colored by Mateus Lopez. It is lettered by Clayton. Actually, no, that's a lie. Samney does his own. It's confusing. There's a colorist credit. Oh, I see. It's co-plotted by Waid and Samney. It is drawn by Samney. It is colored by Mateus Lopez. It is lettered by Clayton Cowles, although Chris Samney does some of the lettering effects. This is basically the first months of after Dick Grayson is adopted by Bruce Wayne. And he's trying to figure out how to be a parent, both to him as Dick Grayson and to him as Robin. And Batman has a lot of fears of this Robin, this little kid, being alongside him on these missions. And he's trying to teach him everything about his way that he's learned to investigate and solve crime. Everything from being careful to being thorough to no guns. And so we get that story playing out beside a mob story. But the really delightful parts of this are as Commissioner Gordon kind of becomes our perspective character, looking at like, you've got to be kidding me. You know this city, it's a war out there, and he's so young. And so Gordon's kind of against it. And And if we're being honest, Batman's a little bit against it too, but you kind of get the sense that Batman is having Dick along as Robin as a cure for his post-traumatic stress, which is very much baked into Robin's origin and the death of the Graysons and the reason he's an orphan to begin with. This is overlaid across a mob plot, and I think that even though sometimes it feels like it's a weird fit for the gleeful quality that the series could have with Robin at the fore of it, I think it's good to start out with this kind of very low super version of the world, because it really juxtaposes how ridiculous and silly Robin is as a hero in this world, as opposed to just having him fighting Joker right away. But it does also develop the story of Clayface, and that is really exciting as well. But I love that we get to see so many firsts with Robin and Batman. Not only the first time Robin walks a tightrope in front of Batman and Batman realizes how talented he really is, but also the first time Robin at school has to explain why he's got a bruise from fighting with Batman to his social services worker. And it's really important to point out here, this truly is co-plotted by Wade and Samney. Samney is dictating the story just as much as Wade here, and I referred to this earlier, that there's some writers where I just love when they truly collaborate with somebody else. Wade and Samney together are such a great collaboration, and I just think that Samney brings out all of the best qualities in Wade's storytelling. And I think the part of what I love about this is it still is an early Batman, so there's a little bit sense of his roughness or his brutality that you sometimes get when you go back and read his Golden Age books without being totally ahistorical either to the original Golden Age books or to the version of Batman's origins that we know now. Here's that scene, by the way, where he passes off having a bruise by just convincing a bully at school to punch him so that he can pass off that there was a reason he had that bruise. It's just a charming comic. It's a gorgeous comic. It's going to become an evergreen comic because it is that level of quality. And some of these internal splash pages by Samney are just so incredible. I really look forward to it every month. Okay, now we come to issue number 29. Oh, sorry, I was caught up because I was trying to say goodbye and good night to Ellen and Cedric. I know this gets really late for our European friends, and I look forward to seeing what your thoughts are about my top 30 when you come back to watch the rest of the video. Now let's talk about another DC book, Green Arrow. This starts out from a new writer taking over the book. Of course, the first 2 years, or year and a half of this book was written by Joshua Williamson. Here it is taken over by Chris Condon, and every single issue has been drawn by Montos, colored by Adriano Lucas. If you have been watching my show on a weekly basis, you know I am obsessed with this book. This is a great example of, now that we're into the top 30, but really the whole top 60, any of these books I could easily say is one of my favorite books of the year because I love this. I love how bold Adriano Lucas's colors are. By the way, this is lettered by Hassan Otsman Elhau. I just love that this feels like a Green Arrow that is ripped directly from Mike Grell's Green Arrow, even though he's experienced everything this character has experienced in the intermittent, what has it been now, 30 years since Mike Grell's run ended, but it just feels like it's of a piece with that. He's a little bit of a rebel again, and he feels bad about the amount of privilege he's had as this moneyed captain of industry, but also that he really has caused some of the problems that he is out there to solve. So most of this year has been one big arc calling the Freshwater Kills, about a community where the groundwater was infected with radioactive waste, and so all the people there are getting cancer. And Ali, at some point very briefly, had been an acting CEO of this company, and now is it one person or a whole community of people in Freshwater are carrying out murders against the people who infected their community. So Ollie's own life might be at risk, but also he wants to figure out who is doing the murders and who's going to be next on the list. But also he's got some feelings, some punitive feelings about these people who poison this community as well. The action in this is so spectacular. Montos has really showed here, and he was spectacular doing his Green Lantern book previous to this, but his ability to just track complex action, physical action from page to page and really show us motion without overusing panels. I think a lot of times, and a lot of reasons that books feel decompressed is because in the modern day, artists are not good at showing the progression of action, so they want to draw so many panels, and the writers don't trust them, and so they have them draw so many panels to show every single step and every single punch. Montos understands how to take one movement, an arrow shooting through the window, and then continuing it on the next page with Green Arrow bursting through that window and then landing on top of him. We never have to see the actual physical moment he lands on top of this guy. It is shown by the way we see him looking down at him as both of their bodies are traveling to be increasingly parallel to the ground in these two frames, so that when they're parallel to the ground at the bottom, we understand that that's where they went. I could go through and dissect these Montos issues panel by panel. He is so good. I love him colored by Adriano Lucas, and I love the efficiency of Chris Condon's writing here. I actually don't love a ton of Condon books on the market right now. This book, however, is really something special. Superjob saying, not a Williamson fan, so really glad Green Arrow got a new writer and his first arc was really good. The great part for me about the Williamson book, and I did like it, was that it was a Green Arrow family book, and I think there's a lot of family members to appreciate in this Green Arrow world, and I liked it for that reason. But I do like him being solo as well, especially when there's a real reason for him to be solo, and there certainly is here. Hello to Flavio MRP. Quincognito, you always seem to hate Condon except for this book, but can I see from the art why this would be, or I can see from the art why this would be so appealing. Yeah, Condon really hasn't really, the rhythm of his writing has not really clicked with me on other books. But we're really clicking on this one, let me tell you. Because this book is truly a highlight of my pull. And I can't believe Montos has kept up the regular pace on it because the art is so detailed. How is he doing it? I don't know. Okay, now we are moving on to another book. Oh, so this is a book, if you were watching my show early in the year, you heard me talk about so much. And this is one of those ones that kind of straddled the year in a weird way. So I'm afraid it's not going to turn out on top best of lists, but for me, it's truly one of the best of the year. And it is Welcome to the Maynard. It is by James Robinson, art by Jay Bone, colors from Ian Herring, and letters from Jim Campbell. This was like the Disney cartoon movie you've always wanted and never got to have. It's about this young woman who becomes a bellhop in a magical hotel, but she's not really just a bellhop. It turns out she's part of their internal investigations team, and being a bellhop is just her undercover. So she's got to learn her way around the hotel, learn all the possibilities of the hotel, and learn all the personalities of the hotel, while also starting to investigate a series of crimes in the hotel that are stealing people's magical, valuable objects. This is so whimsical, and I do, you know, when I first saw the art, I was like, I don't know, do I want to read a whole comic book with this kind of very cartoony art? It reminds me of 101 Dalmatians or Aristocrats. No, I think it was perfect. I think James Robinson absolutely knew the kind of classic 60s pop vibe the series would need to have, and I think Jay Bone on art and Ian Herring's colors nailed it exactly. I really love that we get a little bit of the personal life of this bellhop, why she's working at the hotel, how it's putting a strain on her regular human relationship outside of this, because her normal girlfriend does not know that she is this magical person, or at least magic adjacent person. But it doesn't let that take over the whole book. I think in a series that's just 4 issues, you got to keep your focus on the main story that people are going to want to keep up with. And the main story here is the story of the magical crimes and how that has to do with the hotel guests. I love this book. I unreservedly love this book. If this kind of art speaks to you, you will like it. If the story I'm describing about the magical quality, if you want to see kind of a Disney cartoon that's in the styles of Aristocrats, but it is about a magical, whimsical world, if all of these things are appealing to you, this is your comic book. It hits on every one of those promises that it makes. John Remy saying it was a cute, and it felt like those Disney Channel movies for sure. Now we move on to number 27 as we escalate towards my top books. So these are books you have absolutely seen in my top 10 at some points. And speaking of absolute, it is the Eisner winner for Best New Series of 2024. Of course, I'm talking now about its issues that are out in 2025, which is Absolute Wonder Woman, written by Kelly Thompson with the absolutely breathtaking artwork of Hayden Sherman, colored by Jordie Bellaire, lettered by Becca Carey. And of course, we also had a 2-issue sequence by one of my most favorite artists who I will show up for anytime, any place, Matea Dia-Lewis, who also worked on several other past books with Kelly Thompson, including her Jessica Jones run and their indie book, The Cull. The thing I've been saying about this Wonder Woman book, and if you have not been reading it, I really want to make you aware of it, is so many of these books in the Ultimate Universe and in the Absolute Universe are just a slightly different version of their hero. It's their hero who woke up from being frozen in ice later. It's their hero who got bit by a spider later. It's their hero who came to Earth later. It's their hero who both of their parents didn't necessarily die. And so it just doesn't feel like the books are very different, and that's fine. That's what an alternate universe is. It's just a tiny spin on something. It's not a full-on Elseworld that's in a steampunk world. But this book, amongst the heap of all of the Absolute and Ultimate books, this book really does something totally radical with the character of Wonder Woman without changing who she is. She's still a warrior of love. She's still somebody who leads with compassion, but her entire origin has been turned on its head by Kelly Thompson in a way that is so shocking and yet makes so much sense that you cannot help but admire the sheer cleverness that Thompson could come to a character with a history that stretches back to 1941 and do something so fundamentally different with her that makes so much much sense. And because of the way she connects Wonder Woman not just to Amazons, but to magic, to Greek mythology, and to the underworld of Greek mythology, it really makes Wonder Woman much more of a monster hunter right from the start. And of course, she's got her big giant sword, much like Cloud's sword from Final Fantasy VII, but it's not just about the big giant sword. We find out that everything about her powers is different. Everything about her lasso, everything about her arm and her armor, the symbols tattooed on her. This is a completely different Wonder Woman than you have ever experienced in another Wonder Woman book. And we get part of the explanation for that in this 2-part interlude called The Lady or the Tiger with art from Matteo De Luis. Some people think his art is a little bit over-rendered. They're like, I don't get it, it looks stiff. I don't see any stiffness at all in his artwork. If you've ever been on his Instagram, you can see he's actually an outstanding penciler, even before he adds all of this color and all of this lighting. But to me, this is the opposite of stiff. I wish I could read every comic looking like this, and I like that you can see that he can ratchet it back a little bit, because if you look at the scenes of the younger Diana as she reflects in her time's first meeting with all of these gods of mythology as she was a little kid, you can see that he renders very differently on those pages. So we wrapped up the first arc. We got that 2-issue arc to kind of explain a lot of the mythology and the origin of some of Wonder Woman's powers and her attitudes towards the world, and now we're into a second arc where she's contending with the horrors of the man's world and all of the things that might be allied against her and might be trying to weaponize the powers of the monster that she defeated in her first arc. And again, Hayden Sherman, I don't think there's anybody in the industry who's doing things as quite in the interesting way with panel layouts as Hayden Sherman, other than Deb Promalik, who is on Moon Knight. And I would not be shocked to see Hayden Sherman win the Best Penciler Eisner last year. Just this weekend, they got to take home the award for Best New Series here, because it is usually accepted by either the writer or the penciler. This book, you don't have to be reading DC, you don't have to be reading Absolute Universe, you don't even have to like Wonder Woman, but if you truly love Wonder Woman, I do think you would truly love this book. Logan Wayne thought this would have to be in the top 5. Well, you know, the books that are higher than this, I would just recommend a little bit stronger. I said that there were no negative vibes, positive vibes only. So I did like every issue of this. There was no issue I didn't like, but there are reasons that I would recommend other things more strongly than this. Circe is one of my favorite characters in mythology, so I absolutely love the way that she's used in here. Superdrop saying, I love the character design for this version of Wonder Woman, different enough but still recognizable. Wonder Woman Jamie C's 27, shocked to see it not in the top 10. Well, my top 10 is all what for me are bangers, but we've got to keep going. So let's keep, I loved this sequence where she faces off against Dr. Poison again. This book relies the least out of all of the Absolute Universe books, except for maybe Martian Manhunter, at being like, here's the thing you know, but a little bit different. Oh, look, tee-hee, we're having an appearance of Gorilla Grodd. This book is really not doing that. It introduces Etta Candy and Steve Trevor, which I think you have to in a Wonder Woman story, but it's really playing with such a unique lane all of its own that it does not feel like it's just retelling common Wonder Woman stories. And maybe in the aspect, it's actually a positive thing that Wonder Woman's Rogues Gallery is not quite as iconic as Batman or Superman, because we don't feel the need to just reinvent all of her rogues for this. Okay. Now we come to number 26, and this is another Kelly Thompson book. And I really had trouble deciding which one of these I would place in which order. They literally have the same score in my algorithm. This is Birds of Prey. It has been drawn throughout this year by Sami Basri. It started out with Adriano Lucas on colors. It just has in the issue that came out on July 2nd, switched to different colors, but that's not part of this accounting, because this is only about the books that came out through June 30th of this year, and it's lettered by Eisner winning Clayton Cowles. The thing I really love about this book is that Kelly Thompson immediately hooks up with the old idea of Birds of Prey that Gail Simone really established after she took over from Chuck Dixon, which is that it's a group that has a constantly permeable number of members, and you can use that to the benefit of the book, but to change the tone of the kinds of stories. Do you want to do a heist story? Do you want to do a fight story? Do you want to do a sci-fi story? Bring in different characters. And what that really does, though, is there has to be a core of the characters that work from arc to arc, other than just Black Canary, because that's how you keep a pulsing heart at the middle of this book. And I think Kelly Thompson, quite by accident, to hear her accounting of it, discovered that that pulsing heart of the book is Big Barda and Cassandra Cain as Batgirl. She knew she liked writing these characters. She knew she wanted them as part of the team. But as she discovered them in the writing of over the course of the first 13-issue mega arc and pushing into the second year of this title, she just discovered there's something truly magical about them. This is the best I've seen Cassandra Cain used, I think, since the beginning of New 52. I mean, in the past 15 years, for me, pour moi, this is the best Cassandra Cain, and also perhaps the best Big Barda as well. I love that Basri will take big swings on art. I think he's an artist that's been very much treated just like a work person artist that just fills in on runs and does fine. No, I think he's like really up there with some of the most iconic artists who can deliver these really plain, attractive, cartooned pages that have a little hint of something classic to them, but still feel very modern, especially because some of his layout choices, both in terms of panel layout and art layout. And I love that Adriano Lucas was along for the vibe. The thing I love about Adriano Lucas as a colorist, who, if I had to choose my favorite colorist of the year, it might actually be him, is I love that he always finds moments to go super saturated, but that doesn't mean he pushes everything. He knows how to use pastels. He knows how to knock back backgrounds. It's not everything saturated all the time, but he always finds moments that can be super saturated. And again, just this page, like playing with layout, playing the way that the page tilts all to one side, so it almost gives us a perspective look like the parts of the page are closer to us than other parts, like we're in the middle of turning it, and then playing with a 9-panel grid in the middle of 2 panels at the beginning and the end, as we see Batgirl summoning Constantine here. Constantine is kind of the one token male member of Birds of Prey. It's just been so much fun. It has a very distinct color look to unite every single issue. It's been such a good showcase of these characters, and it really just has got a wonderful, loving, beating heart in it, while still making good use of everybody in a way that makes it, for me, one of the best team books on the stands. Kelly Thompson has been great. Glad she's getting her flowers. You know that I am a huge Kelly Thompson fan. I've been a huge Kelly Thompson fan ever since she was a writer at CBR. And I say that not because I'm just being like, oh, it was cool, I knew it before, because I just want to say that everything she's done has been good. Her columns were good. Her novels are good. Her comic books are good. She just has a brain that fascinates me, and I'm so thankful every time I get new work from her. Jean-Remy Argueta saying Birds of Peak, one of my favorite Big Barda representation. Paul Gunnar saying Gail Simone definitely expanded Birds of Prey to a whole different level of love. Superjob based the new D&D character on Barda because of this run. Love this book. Now we move on to number 25, if I can get my credits down that far. And this is a book that I wasn't sure if I was going to love, because I'm not predisposed to love this particular writer or this particular artist, but it is Bug Wars from Image Comics, from Jason Aaron, art by Mahmoud Asrar, colored by Matthew Wilson, who I do really love, and lettered by possibly my favorite letterer, Becca Carey. This book works for me because it combines 2 or 3 things that I think go together really, really well. It starts out with some family drama. This family's father has died. They're moving back into their family home, which happens to be the place where he passed away. And he was an entomologist, so he passed away surrounded by and possibly devoured by bugs. And so he has an older brother the older brother who discovered the father that way and has been traumatized by it, and the younger brother who's kind of always romanticized him as an entomologist, and so he loves bugs. Meanwhile, out in the yard, there's this whole society of bugs and tiny mite people that are too small for us to perceive, that work as their spokesperson and spokespeople and their governments, and kind of like represents their society. There's so much world building. You can tell, partially because some of it's in the issues, that Jason Aaron just has reams and reams and reams of world building that he's written for the ants, the spiders, the roaches. There's so much in this world that we could explore that I feel like we could just read a story Bible. But the way we get to explore it is that our main character gets shrunken down, and he's moving through the yard trying to understand this hidden world that his father experienced that he never knew existed, and trying to understand what is his connection to it, and why does how does the whole world of Earth not realize that these bugs even exist with these societies on their own. It's brutal. It's occasionally surprisingly sexy, but it's also just such an interesting epic, and it's clearly only the beginning of a longer epic. Jason Aaron is delivering one complete series in this first book, which is called The House of Slaymaker, but I think it's very clear that there's more to this world, and there's a hint that there's bugs all over the world that echo these bugs and represent kind of like a wider microscopic world that we could explore. It truly feels like a book that has legs that could go on forever and ever. And of course, there is the both physical and existential threat of what if somebody mows the lawn that has become your society, your cathedral, your forest, and all of a sudden your whole world goes away. It's like an exploding earth in a Jonathan Hickman book, but it's just the fault of the lawnmower, and so all of the bugs are united against the boy who mows the lawn. Now we come to number 24, and this is a book that I am not seeing enough people loving, and I don't understand why. It is Doom's Division. It is a One World Under Doom tie-in that is a spinoff of Tiger Division, which in its own is, in a way, partially a spinoff, or at least a partner to the Pan-Asian heroes that we've seen grouped together under the labels of both Agents of Atlas and Atlantis Attacks, although this is a different group of them that are specific, I believe, I want to say, to South Korea. Yes, South Korea's intelligence agency. So this continues the team from the Tiger Division series. It's written by Yoon Ha Lee with art from Min-Kyu Young. And I've been saying all over the internet to anybody that will listen that these two creators are doing something that I don't think a lot of other team books are doing, which is capturing some big Claremont energy. Because this is a big team of a lot of personalities, and we don't know them that well because they've only ever had like 10 issues that we could go back and read them in. Yet they feel so distinct, so personable here. So like there's a story to follow with each one of them, and they're not just powers, but they're also personalities. And then Yoon Ha Lee stretches even further and starts bringing in other characters, Arrow, Wave, and even Karma and Sunspot. So it becomes a de facto mutant book, and in that capacity, it's one of the best mutant books on the stands. But all of this is under the auspices of the fact that this team used to be the Special Forces team just of South Korea, but now they've become Doom's delegates in the Asian theater. And how do they feel about being part of the control of Doom? Of course, there's the largely unspoken in this book, but still lingering there, the idea of like, is this too different than the North Korea situation? Have we been pulled into something we've been fighting against all of our lives? But what's so interesting that is in this book is Yoon Ha Lee does so much cultural stuff. I feel like I'm actually learning about real world culture, real world protest movements, real world food in the course of this book. And it's not treating all these characters that are Pan-Asian representation like they're a monolith. They're all individual characters with their own cultural attachment, and some of them are not just from South Korea. So I just think this book is doing such a great job at juggling all the characters and personalities. It really has me hooked. It's a run that I want to keep reading. I'm more invested in this team than I am in any of the X-Men teams. And I really think it's got great, bold colors from Matteo Iancono, doing a great example of just Marvel House style, making it look bold, colorful, and comic booky with very clear letters from Travis Lanham. I'm a big, big fan of it. Nick N is praying for a massive omnibus after this event. Hopefully it will all get collected. Well, this event is so big and sprawling, it might be too many tie-ins to fit into all one omnibus. Honestly, as soon as we get past the 50 tie-ins mark, things start getting a little bit hard to do. And this is another book where I just think the action is so clear, even with so many characters with so many different kinds of powers, strength powers, fire powers, mind powers. I just feel like I always can understand what's happening. And that makes it really fun to be introduced to characters who you're not super familiar with, because if a book doesn't ever tell you what their powers are or what their identities are, how they're going to work, it becomes really hard to get excited about it. But this book explains all of that very, very clearly. Now we come to number 23. This is me cheating a little bit. I cheated. You know what? It's my countdown and I can do whatever the heck I want with it, because this was not technically a floppy comic. This was actually an original graphic novel, which in a way was a collection, because it's a collection of webtoons that previously existed. For me, webtoons exist outside of my domain of things that I review every single month, because they come out sometimes as frequently as a daily schedule. It's different for things that are on Marvel Unlimited that are technically part of Marvel continuity, but in my mind, there's just a bright line between that. So for me, this OGN was the debut of the story. Maybe I should be reading more OGNs. I don't know, but I'm telling you, I broke the rules because I loved it so much. And it is, oh no, where's the cover? Where's the cover? Cover. There it is. It's Reversal, written by Alex DeCampi with really, really spectacular art from Skylar Partridge, colors from Kelly Fitzpatrick, and letters from Hassan Otsman Al-How. This is a complete story. It has a beginning and an end, and it's about a family who lives in a city where the city itself is adjacent to a fantasy forest. The fantasy forest has kind of fallen into our world. It's got fantastical creatures in it that occasionally raid our city, and everybody hears the air raid sirens, and they've got to go underground whenever there is a fantasy attack. So we see all these buildings that have been kind of marauded and broken apart and beaten up by these creatures who sometimes steal whole people out of the city to munch on. And so the woman that is the main character in this works at the agency who's trying to contain this, and she's a scientist there, but she's been discredited. At the same time, her daughter gets a hold of an artifact that has a very specific connection to the world and to the magic of the world, and that turns her into, much in the style of Shazam, into a completely different person who happens to be man. So that's a little confusing for her. And she's, she's a young black girl and she's got disabilities, and she turns into an adult man who is basically a superhero. So there's a lot of really, really fun plots here. And I just think Skylar Partridge, I guess you can tell that this had been a webtoon at some point because it's so powerfully bold and evocative, and you can tell that these panels had to kind of hold their own weight while people were like waiting for another page. There's nothing wasted. It's so efficient. There's storytelling in every one. I really love how the characters are often super foregrounded, so we focus on what they're going through emotionally, and the colors are just a wash in the background. It doesn't feel like there's a lack of detail to me. It just feels like we've chosen what to focus on. And there's a lot of conflicts for this family, right? Mom has lost her job, even though she seems to be the one who knows what the real science behind the magic actually is. Is she going to let her daughter turn into this man and defend the city? Does that mean her daughter's at risk? What happens if this sword, this artifact gets broken? Does that mean she loses her daughter forever? And what's this man's story? Why did he come from the forest? What is the connection he has with the source of the magic that has caused all of these creatures to maraud through the city? I am totally obsessed with it, and I really hope you give it a chance. I think you can still read it on Webtoons, but I would just buy the OGN. I actually might get it physically because I just thought it was so adorable, and without ruining a really cool surprise in it, it does have some queer themes as well that really truly took me by surprise. I had no idea they were coming. Okay, now we come to series number 22, and this is so unexpected for me. I cannot believe I like this book. It is not a book I ever planned to like. In fact, the first 6 or 7 issues of it I hated, and it just won me over issue because the writing was so good, and it came out of last year as one of my favorite books, and this year it has dominated my imagination and my favor. It is Green Lantern by Jeremy Adams with a number of different artists, but primarily Zenescope, although there are some other artists on the book, and he colors himself when he or sometimes it's colored by Romulo Fajardo Jr., one of the hardest names for me to say, not because it's hard to pronounce, because it has all the tongue-tying consonants for me, and lettered by Dave Sharp. And here's the thing, I don't like Hal Jordan. I think he's an asshole. And so to center a book on Hal Jordan and to acknowledge that he's a bit of an asshole kind of makes it not fun for me to write the book or read the book. And that's where I started on this book. I was like, well, this is just a book about Hal Jordan being an asshole. But actually, Jeremy Adams is so deft that he lets Hal kind of just be his asshole self, but it doesn't make us hate him. And it also doesn't make us look like the world just conforms around him and is his plaything. It actually gives us a nuanced look about how sometimes he's wrong and he realizes he could grow emotionally, but sometimes the reason he's an asshole is his willpower. He has to believe he's right. That's why he's the Green Lantern. But to just have that on its own can sometimes lack a little bit of dimensionality. This book has dimensionality. It comes in 2 halves. Part of it is that we're getting a whole side adventure with Kyle Rayner, who could have easily been relegated to the core book, but instead we're getting him here, and he's adventuring with Connor Kent, who I love, and the artwork is so good. I think this might be a Fernando Persarin page from this particular issue because he drew on this issue. But then after we got past that issue, we had art briefly from Jack Herbert, colored by Romulo Fajardo Jr. In this book, we continued to follow the Kyle Rayner adventure in space as they're investigating some problems with the source wall, but then we're also getting Hal on Earth dealing with some Earthbound problems, and also his relationship with Star Sapphire, who's also starring in Justice League Unlimited, but the reason she even is Star Sapphire spins out of the first 18 issues of this book. But it kind of humanizes Hal, not only because he has a love interest, because I'm like, don't just humanize men by giving them women to fall for, but because she's fallible in ways and he's fallible in ways, and they're both infallible in other ways, and so the interplay between them gives me a lot more to love about Hal Jordan. And then we get back to Zenescope doing art, and it's just incredible. And they're dealing with so many problems. They're dealing with the fact that they're trying to contain people who are in this heightened emotional state and using emotion powers without the rings, as I talked about earlier with the Green Lantern Corps, and so that brings them into conflict with Director Bones and the DEO. But then also Hal Jordan needs to go to hell to retrieve a past Lantern, but that means he's brought into conflict with the Spectre, who he previously kind of was. And so, by the way, Romulo Fajardo Jr. does continue to color Zenescope. I'm sorry I said he was not involved, because the colors are amazing. Honestly, sometimes when I see Zenescope pages of this book, I wonder if anybody else should ever draw a Green Lantern. I think it should be Zenescope drawing the Hal Jordan book forever, and it should be Persarin drawing the core book forever, and so it has been decreed, because this is so gorgeous. I truly don't think you have to love Green Lantern, because I quite explicitly do not love Green Lantern, but I am obsessed with this book and everywhere that it's taking me in this universe where the powers in between the regular colors of the Lantern have been unleashed, including the power of sorrow. Nick N saying this is the best Green Lantern run since John's. Superjob saying seconded about Hal Jordan. Kyle will always be my GL. John Remy saying Hal Gordon is such a F up. I love him. But yeah, I mean, this book has got some magic. I would say start from the start. And if you find yourself hating Hal Jordan so much at the start that you're like, I can't hang with this, I say good, because that's actually the point of this book. But in 2025, it has been phenomenal. So now we are just on the verge of my top 20. And let's see what number 21 is. It is Doom Academy. This is totally complete. It was a One World Under Doom tie-in that's already run its full course, a full 5 issues, written by new to Marvel writing, although she's edited in the past, Mackenzie Cadenhead, art from Pasquale Ferry, although we also have a storybook sequence inside that is illustrated from Jal and P. Lemos. Pasquale Ferry's art is colored by the colorist who's been with this book since the beginning, Edgar Delgado. It is lettered by Clayton Cowles. I've always liked Doom Academy, but I just felt like the original Strange Academy books were a little bit of a sensory overload for me. It was so many characters, so much moving around, and I think that they were distinct and their personalities were fun, but it was a lot. It wasn't focused on any one given character, and sometimes I would kind of just get lost in the mix a little bit, which is just me being an old person who likes a point of view character, but also just because there were so many different characters and each one of them was from a different canon and a different type of power. This is not a knock on the original Strange Academy. This is me saying, even if you didn't already love Stage Academy, which I didn't. Kid Krisis loves it. I'm okay on it. Even if you didn't love it, this book could be for you. At the end of Blood Hunt last year, all the kids of Doom Academy basically leave Strange Academy and become Doom Academy because Dr. Doom can solve their problem in a way that Dr. Strange and Dr. Voodoo cannot. So now we follow them into their time in Doom Academy in Latveria. And this really doesn't tie in so much to One World Under Doom. It's just got the headline on it to sell it. Really, this is just about a small group of them, mostly just Zoe, Dale, and Shaylee, trying to find their way around this new social structure and a new school and all of the different things that come with that and the magic that is there. And so it results in Zoe getting trapped in a storybook world full of monsters where she starts to fall in love with another Doom Academy student who's been trapped in there for possibly years, decades, centuries, all while on the outside, Doyle and Shaylee team up with another kid at this school, Scoop, to try to figure out where their friend is lost and how to break their friend out. The art is absolutely gorgeous. I love Pasquale Ferry on this. I think he just brings such childlike wonder to it, and I love the little motion that he gives to all of the characters that they wander around the world. They feel so fully realized, and I think this is a perfect follow-up to the world that was originally defined by Scotty Young and, of course, by Humberto Ramos on the artwork. But then the storybook worked for me too, because the characters were still recognizably on model, but it was so different and really felt like I was falling into a book as we continued reading. I think this was very satisfying, and by the end I actually found that I was hungry to read about all of the other Strange Academy students in this world, which I think is a success, to start out with this and be like, wow, now don't you want to know where all the other kids are and what they're up to? I wish if I could upgrade one limited series to an ongoing this year, it might be this one. I just want to see more of Mackenzie Cadenhead. I think as a fiction writer and as a prior editor, she just knows how to keep this book moving, how to keep us focused on the characters, how to keep the relationships and the conflicts tight and understandable, and then resolve them in ways that are actually appreciable. I just think it was a very well constructed book. I love how the other characters, so here's a page of them all in the storybook world, and just look how Doyle looks in the storybook world. It's just so cute. I love it so much. And so then it resolves, and in the resolve, we briefly have Dr. Voodoo, who's been established on the staff here to continue caring for his students, kind of having a little bit of a face-off with Dr. Doom, who's like, I'm not really happy with your teaching, but I'm certainly happy with how my students handled themselves. All right, folks, we are now into the top 20, the top third of this, which means we're absolutely going to go to the 3-hour mark. So let me switch out to my next PDF, full of covers and interior pages. And again, if you've joined us midway through, these are my top 60. It's not top 60 because of any special thing about that number. 60 is just how far down in the 390 comic book series I've read so far this year that I felt like I could completely and without reservations recommend these books. Every one of these books is a book that I am literally saying, this book is great. I think you will like it. So if anything is appearing on here, it has my endorsement. Okay, let me just open up. I think I closed my credits PDF. Credits. Oh, because we are switching over credits to number 20 to number 1 as well. Okay, here we go. Let me do my resharing. And these books are ordered with my own special custom algorithm, as I have mentioned, which takes into account my issue-by-issue ratings, the length of the run, because I think longer runs should get a little bit more credit for keeping the quality consistent. Shorter runs, I think, have to impress me a little bit more with more spectacular issues since they have such a brief run to play out over, but also my overall recommendation index of would I say this book is a book that I would recommend reading, and all 60 of these books are in the positive on my recommendation index. So don't get too hung up on if a book was 45 or 35 or 15. These are all books that I love, all the way down to number 60. I would recommend them. It just means my strength of recommendations are getting stronger as we go. Let's tackle the top 20. This is a book I haven't gotten to talk about in the pull list for a couple of months because it's been in between issues, but I absolutely love it. And you can see me talking about it earlier in the year. It's Dust to Dust, which is from Giant Generator, which is Rick Remender's imprint, but it's written by J.G. Jones and Phil Bram, art from J.G. Jones, and letters from Jackie Marzan. I am not predisposed to like Old West stuff, so it's not like I just read this book and I loved it. What I am predisposed to love is books that explore elements of U.S. history that I feel like in the modern day are recent enough that we know about them, but also the stories from within them have been forgotten. And I often feel like that's the case about Dust Bowl and Great Depression America. It just feels like we're all aware of it, but we're not aware of what the realities were on the ground. So I love any book that dives into that. Another book that I am a huge fan of is Days of Sand. And it feels like this book absolutely could exist right next door to Days of Sand because it is a very similar theme exploring a very similar world. We get a photographer from a major East Coast news agency who's here in the Dust Bowl to take pictures and document what's going on in this world. We have a small town sheriff who used to be a soldier but now is just kind of stuck in this town, a town that has a little bit of corruption, it has some terrible people in it, but you know, they keep a balance and they learn to live with each other. But even in that balance, people are being driven away because there's no way to profit or live in this small isolated town. And also there has been a deadly murder in this town that's reflective of a murder that he did not handle well as a sheriff in the past, and is the reason a lot of the people in the town don't trust him. This spectacular sepia-toned J.G. Jones art is just so incredible. He draws so many beautiful people, faces, hairstyles of bygone eras, personalities, backgrounds, offices, furniture. It's just such a master class in building an environment. And the great thing is, even though there's a murder mystery starting to unfold within this book, I also feel like that's not the only reason I'm reading it. I'm reading it for the interpersonal stuff. I'm reading it for the corruption of the mayor. I'm reading it for the two teenagers that are dating, although that girl should definitely break up with that guy. He's an asshole, but it's all part of the larger plot. I find myself totally enveloped by this and completely in love with it issue after issue. Bunkmaster B completely forgot Dust to Dust is coming out. The book is beautiful and is doing a great job of being a Western without being a cowboy book. A great description of it. And this is why I keep the algorithm, and this is the other reason that I don't always trust people. So I've been sitting on my butt for a long time now. I'm old. I got to wake up the butt. This is a reason that I don't always trust when I see top 10 lists coming out from any big outlet or person who's like a critic online, is because I think there's a strong recency effect. I think these books that had one issue come out in 2024 and then two issues in 2025, they just forget them. And I also think that books that came out early in the year, they forget them because you'll find that all of a sudden it's just a bunch of books that came out like a week ago. I really think data or it didn't happen. And if you've been reading every book that's come out this year so far, as I have, almost 400 series, these are really the cream of the crop. And this book is something special that is completely unlike anything else that we have seen from anybody else recently. Now we come to number 19 on my list, and it is another comic book outside of the big three. It is Conan the Barbarian from Titan Comics. Let me tell you, if you've always had a concept of what Conan ought to be, because you've seen him in other media, you've seen him in movies, you've read a novel of him, and you've been waiting for a comic book to deliver everything that concept exists for you in your mind, Jim Zub is doing that. Jim Zub may have been born to write this book. This book, every single issue, has all of the qualities that made original Conan comics in the 1970s and 1980s great. The tone of it, the kinds of adventures, the narration of Conan, and there has been an absolute killer's row of artists on this book over the course of this year, including hold on, I want to credit them correctly. Danica Brine, who drew that issue we were just looking at, colored by Jao Canola. Then we have this one. This is by Doug Braithwaite, a master of the form, and he, I believe, is coloring himself you know, Diego Rodriguez coloring him here. Let's go on to look at even more stunning internal art. This is more Doug Braithwaite. By the way, all of the lettering is lettered by Richard Starkings and Comic Crafts Tyler Smith, a friend of the channel, and I wouldn't just say that the lettering is great, it is actually great, because I always had complaints about the lettering on Conan at Marvel. This does not echo those problems in the slightest. Then we have an issue here that is drawn by Fernando Dagnino, colored by Diego Rodriguez. Just so much incredible artwork, but the thing that I really love about it the most is it feels like the right kind of stories for Conan. I like Conan with a little bit of a tinge of the supernatural, but I don't want to see him cast in the middle of a spell duel between wizards. I want there to be a supernatural element, a serpent crown, a wizard who's controlling one person, a person who turns from a cat to a person. And Zub just strikes the perfect balance here, and it's absolutely fascinating. Also, we got this one shot that to me I'm including as part of this series because it's clearly part of Conan and it was just a single issue. I think it was meant to be like an annual or something. It's written by Walt Simon with art from Jerry Ma, also lettered by Starkings and Smith. And this one-shot issue was just incredible. Every page of it was just like a burst with imagination and color, as all written by Walt Simonson. What's great about this too is that Zub basically just is doing little 1, 2, 3 issue arcs. We did have a 4-issue arc last year. Everything this year is much faster. You could start anywhere. Start at the number 1, start with the issue out this month. It doesn't do a ton of recapping, but I just have always found it really easy to jump into because I've actually read a lot of it out of order because I kind of caught the train as it was moving and then I went back to pick up behind, and I'm just totally in love with it. Totally fascinated and in love. Hank says, I've been putting together a new calendar and just grabbed Wade and J.G. Jones' Strange Fruit book. Love the art and pre-ordered Dust to Dust. Nick N is surprised by Conan. John Remy Argueta have been following the Savage Sword of Conan, which has also had some really good stuff, but maybe I should catch up on this one too. Been hearing great stuff. Bunkmaster B saying Tyler's a real one for sure. A great letter and a great guy. And also Walt Simonson, that's a guy who knows his way around a fantasy comic. He certainly does. Yeah, I have not been disappointed by a single page of Conan this entire year. Now we come to number 18, and this is a comic that I know many of you love and does not need a big introduction from me. It is Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu by Jed MacKay with the primary artist of Damala Pramalik, who is one of my favorite artists in the industry right now, and colors from Rachel Rosenberg that have truly turned her into an art star. Her coloring style is completely transformed over the course of her multi-year run on Moon Knight with Jed MacKay, and it's lettered by Corey Petit. I love this series of Moon Knight because Jed MacKay really kicked off this year with a twist. Right before we get into the 2025 issues, he really changes the landscape of Moon Knight and his little band of heroes, and he puts them on their back foot and on the hunt, which means they have to react to what's happening in the world. And part of that is there's a new street drug, glitter, that is instantly addicting people to it, but there's also the vampire crime bosses, there's somebody from Asgard, there's so much happening on the streets of New York that all of the typical street level heroes aren't paying any attention to because these are the things that happen at night. And it really feels like we finally have a Moon Knight where it makes sense that he has his own little world and there are other heroes at the edges of it, but he's the only one who can take care of it. Dev Malia Pramonic's art is extraordinary. It's not just the playing with the layouts. I'm not just looking for people to do freaky layouts all the time. It's the amount of motion. It's the amount of storytelling. It's the amount of emotion that he can tell in it as Moon Knight is being overrun by a bunch of vermin here and then showing the split between the things that's happening inside of his head with his different personalities versus the person who is currently steering the body. We also got some issues from art from Domenico Carbone, which I think did a really good job, but also obviously Rachel Rosenberg really did a good job of unifying it. We got a little bit of a wrestling match, so a little bit of some WWE action and also some Khonshu action in the way that Khonshu, here's that Domenico Carbone issue, the way that Khonshu continues to be both real and imagined in the world of Moon Knight. I just absolutely love this book. It is a blast every month, and I will say in the past I have felt like at points that MacKay's writing has been a little bit decompressed and Moon Knight issues would fly by in like 3 minutes. I don't feel like that this year anymore. I think the issues have a little bit more texture and thought, and there's like a little bit more plot to cling on to, but also the art just gives you so much time to linger. Okay, a lot of Moonlight love. James Abel, Max loved Moonlight, but he's MIA right now. No, he's not. Moon Knight is my crack. John Remy Argueta saying that second omnibus can't come fast enough. I need more, but I can't read this weekly. That settles it. Superjob says Moon Knight is my next binge read. Start from the beginning of McKay because, oh my lord, it is great. McKay has made me a Moon Knight fan. I am loving this. Nick N saying, however, reading in omnibus format is best for me. Yeah, you know, some books just read better in omnibus than monthly, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. There's nothing. Look at the way ADHD. Look at the way Rachel Rosenberg makes the whites glow. Look at like the bluish greenish glow that comes off of Moon Knight every time. Look at the Sienkiewicz style cape that's kind of just curling much bigger than it would actually be off of the edge of that water tower. Absolutely love this book. And it must be said, I don't always take the time to credit cover artists because to me the cover, I'm not buying a book off the stand, so the covers kind of don't mean a whole lot to me, but the covers here from David Parator are really, truly something special. But yeah, as I was saying to Nick N, I just think some books don't read well on a monthly basis. Some of them truly don't. Sometimes, and I think that that's books that are more decompressed or more telling stories for arc. I think that's why I've been really into books that are telling like single issue stories a little bit more this year. And this next book actually is one of them because it's just so much more satisfying every month. I feel like we're moving out of the era where it's fun to read comic books that are telling some like 12-part hyper serialized story that you only get a tiny morsel of every month. It just feels like that's kind of dead. In a world where comics keep getting more expensive and there's more and more things competing for our attention, I think each issue has to be something masterful. And I think that's a trend you absolutely see now that we're really high on the countdown. The reason that these are so much higher on the recommendation index is because a lot of these series have single issues that were really fun to read without caring about the issues on either side. And that's true for this book, Absolute Superman by Jason Aaron. Art primarily from Rafa Sandoval, but also, we had an alternating artist on this, and that was Carmine Di Giandomenico, who I love. Ulysses Ariola, who unites them both in color. I think he's the possibly most underrated colorist in the industry right now. Every time he pops up in a book, it is spectacular, and lettered, of course, by perhaps my favorite letterer, Becca Carey. This book I've described again and again this year as Jason Aaron does Hope Corps, which is funny because this Absolute Universe is a universe without hope. It's supposed to be a universe sans hope. Darkseid has drained it out of the universe. But instead, actually, you get to see what's so important about the little moments of hope that we hold close to us in this world. So this has been telling a lot of very singular 1 and 2 issue stories. We get some flashbacks to the slightly different origin of Superman on Krypton that were really heartbreaking the way they always are, but put a slightly different spin on it. At the same time, we see what's going on Earth with this Lazarus Corporation, which is working as kind of our like corporate overlords, ruling over entire cities with their peacemaker police force, of whom Lois Lane is a member, but she really wants to get back to telling stories, and she cannot let go of this story of the Superman who keeps flying into these slums to try to liberate their people or give them some peace from the Lazarus Corporation. We also have an Omega Man floating around, a Jimmy Olsen. We get more of the origin of the destruction of Krypton and how Superman wound up on our Earth at a more advanced age than the Superman that we know that arrived on our main DC Earth, and what it was like for the Kents to adopt this slightly older boy who had no way of communicating with them rather than adopting him as a baby. Also, we get some cutaways to one of the big villains of this piece. One of them is a particularly crazed version of Brainiac, whose story is actually not that different than the main Brainiac, which I think was one of the few things that I was a little bit disappointed about in this book, but also using Ra's al Ghul as a Superman villain and as the chief, of course, of this Lazarus Corporation. The art in this is so stunning. This is the peak of comic book coloring, and I love the unification here, even though clearly this one is by a different artist. It doesn't feel like it sticks out like a sore thumb. This is also by that artist, but they absolutely feel of a piece with the main art. But I have to say, there are very few people in the world that are capable of what Rafa Sandoval is capable of on a comic book page. There's just so much detail, such powerful characters, so much rendering. There's not a lot of people I could compare him to. I truly think he is one of the peak artists in the industry right now, and I just think this book is absolutely phenomenal. You don't have to love Superman, you don't have to love DC Comics, because I am a latecomer to liking Superman, and I am not always in DC Comics corner, but when they make great comics month after month, I'm in their corner, and this is absolutely a breathtaking book. We have John Remy surprised that Absolute Superman made it over Absolute Wonder Woman, but I can tell you why, because Absolute Wonder Woman at the beginning of the year was still running out the end of that 5-issue arc, and it's not that I downgrade things for having longer arcs, but it was starting to have some middle chapter syndrome where I was like, what is this issue about? Was there a reason this issue couldn't be combined with some other issue? It's still high in my recommendation index, but this book, we're getting into books now that we're so high in the countdown that I never felt like an issue was wasted. Soon we're going to get to books where I feel like never a panel was wasted. good. And so that is why things are so high on this list. I do love Lazarus as the villain for this book, though. So good, says Quincognito. Oh, and the art. The art, the art, the art. Okay, moving on to number 16. This one kind of surprised me because I didn't expect it to be this high, but it speaks to just how powerfully good it has been, even though a couple of issues of this were not my favorite issues of the year, and that is Jed MacKay's Avengers. And part of why I am so hot on this book, and I checked the numbers again and again, this is where it fell, is because of Fareed Karami's art. He is my obsession. As soon as I saw him draw an issue of Daredevil about a year and a half ago, I was like, where is this guy? When is he going to be doing more comic books? Then he drew the Black Panther Blood Hunt miniseries last year. That was also spectacular. And so he's become one of the alternate artists on Avengers. I think he is set to be the next huge breakout in the industry alongside some other folks like Deb Premalick and also Hayden Sherman. So the other thing is we all love Jed MacKay writing Black Cat. So to do a 3-issue story of a heist in space with the Avengers and Black Cat playing against each other and to have it drawn by Fareed Karami, this was a blast. And it was a little bit of a lighter weight move away from the Avengers as the Authority, which is what the first 2 years of this book have been. But then it actually tilted back in that direction because it turns out that Black Cat had partnered with Kang for that heist, and Kang is how this book all started, so it did all come together. Jed MacKay is just good at that kind of thing. There's a reason we've seen 2 of his books in my top 20. So then this book, which seemed like it was going to be a totally frivolous heist story, takes on a much greater significance as it ties into the Avengers' ongoing conflict with Kang, and we just get some truly, truly spectacular fights and splashes of the entire Avengers team lined up alongside and fighting against Kang. And, you know, Karami is absolutely somebody who can go from the quality of a cover, although this is a Valerio Schiti cover, to the quality of an interior. I love an interior artist who is just as good as the cover artists. That makes me excited. Then we moved on to an arc that, oh, look at this page. Look at it, look at it, look at it. And again, a lot of people, there would be not enough contrast on this page to follow because it's busy all throughout. The only part of it that's not busy is that one little strip of space in the middle. But because of the level of detail that's drawn, and credit where it's due, the coloring from Federico Blee to knock out these people in the foreground into this red that's been, as they're being moved around by Wanda's power, lets us focus on all the Avengers. And what a page. I mean, this is one of the coolest superheroes doing super stuff pages that I've seen in any book this year. Then Avengers tipped into One World Under Dune, and it did a much smaller story just focused on Falcon and Black Panther, and we handed off to seeing art from Andrea Braccardo. If you've heard me talk about this book earlier this week on my pull list show, I think it took Andrea Braccardo a little bit of time to get all the character models down of the heroes, but all the character models of their Masters of Evil were actually pretty good. And so by the end of it, I actually was kind of on its side, but this maybe slowed down a hair, and if it hadn't slowed down a hair, it probably would be even higher on my countdown. But Fareed Karami still dropped in one more time to draw a little bit of what's been happening with Black Panther, since we haven't been seeing him for several months before he rejoined Falcon in the fight. Now we come to issue number 15, or series number 15, I should say. And this has someone else who's repeating here in the top 10. In fact, we've kind of gone back and forth, or the top 20, I should say. We've kind of gone back and forth between these two authors for a few books, because this is Jason Aaron again on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The great thing about this, and I think part of why it's so high, is that the first arc was kind of just like an arc 0 or trade 0, reintroducing us and reorienting us into this turtle world. And then this really kicked off the second half of the series of showing them on the outs. The brothers had just been splintered. They all came back to New York. Ha, no pun intended, because they don't have Splinter, or do they? They come back to a New York that's fractured, a New York that's treating its mutants more like second-class citizens than ever before and keeping them contained in their ghetto, and a New York that needs heroes like the Turtles to interfere with the police state that it has become. That's partially courtesy of the Foot, or is it? Are the Foot really offering the soldiers that they're offering, or is there some subterfuge in the background that they don't understand? Not only is Jason Aaron's version of this 4-turtle family the draw here, but you have to talk about the art from Juan Ferreira and the letters from Sean Lee. Juan Ferreira is always spectacular, but he is doing something really special here. The amount of emotion that he gives to each of these turtles and the way that he's differentiated their faces and their body types from each other and the way they react to each other is really something special. Even as we continue to see them splintered, they don't agree with each other and they're fighting each other, but Jason Aaron starts to sketch a little bit of how they're going to come back together as they find their family again, as they're trying to find a way to take back New York and take it out of the control of the people who are interfering with it. I just think this is an all-timer of a run. I'm so sad it's going to only be 12 issues, but you know what? Sometimes good things come in 12-issue packages, and I will be hotly anticipating every last work from Aaron and Ferrer until we move on to the next creative team, which will be written by Gene Luen Yang, who just won the Eisner for Best Writer, so great timing on that. To me, this is a return to form for Turtles. I like them on the streets of New York. I like them in action. I think the most recent 50 issues of their previous ongoing series that started in 2011 or 2012, it was cute and had good personalities, but I missed Turtles in action. This takes me back to the Turtles book that I really loved as it was leaning up to issue 100. Buckmaster B saying, I still have not been able to get used to how emaciated Donnie is. Compliment to Juan on art for that. Yeah, it's definitely for a very specific story reason. And Flavio MRP is enjoying Avengers, but sometimes feel like it's playing a little too safe and old schoolish. I will say the first year of Avengers for me would have been in my top 10. If I did a top group that year, I like them. I like that McKay is playing with them as iconic. Like he picked the most powerful version or the most iconic visual version of each character. There's no B-list on the team. And so that let him play them as the authority, and I love the big canvas he's working on in terms of these major critical events that they've got to intervene on and prevent on Earth before it tips us into a bad timeline. And I just feel like that's been a little bit lost so far in 2025, but that's also because I got the sense he knew he only had a certain amount of time to write an arc before One World Under Doom, so there were kind of like real world editorial concerns restricting him a little bit there. All right, just the art. I mean, I could just look at the art in these pages all day. And the different kind of texture, the different kind of layouts, this page broken up by nunchucks dividing the panels. I just love it. Okay, now we come to issue, by the way, that was letter, I did say, lettered by Sean Lee. Okay, now we come to issue 14, which is one of my favorite comic books of all time, and it's wrapping up in just 2 months, but we got 4 issues of this series out so far this year. It is Wynd, The Power of Blood, by James Tynion IV, Michael Dialynas, never say his name, Michael Dialynas, and lettered by Endworld Design. I absolutely love this world of Wynd, and I think what's really surprised me about this particular series of it is that it's still successful without Wynd really in it. He's kind of off panel for a lot of this series so far, so we're focusing on a supporting cast, but it's always been an ensemble book about these 5 or 6 other kids that are adventuring through the world with Wynd, and now we see them in what should be a utopia for them. They finally found safety in another, human kingdom. They have the chance to have jobs, to be settled, to not just be orphans and nomads, but it's not really working for them. And the reason it's not really working for them is because they're having to contend with how various adults have failed them on various levels. Adults who have failed them as parents, adults who have failed them as mentors, adults who have failed them as mayors, adults who have failed them as kings and generals. And so we're seeing how each of them are individually dealing with that version of the world. And we're also seeing some of the adults who are in the city that is without conflict, realizing that it's allowing them to explore some of the things that they've been avoiding to explore, like how to speak to your son. I love that all along Tynion has used this book both for textual queerness. It has always had queer characters from the very start, even though it's a child storybook style book, although it's a little scary. So I think we found that it's better for kids that are like 9 and up. It's a little too scary for 6 through 8-year-olds. But also it has queer themes that would be a little bit much for a book of this youthful energy, that are explored through the fantastical. So like it doesn't really have any of its young characters be super closeted or be too in conflict about the people that they love or their gender identity, but it plays out those kind of closeted themes through the fantastical elements, like this parent who can't talk to his son anymore because his son has inherited an aspect of magic and the father is bigoted against magical stuff. So I love that it's like playing 2 layers of that story, and this series is really doing that, but it also just has like some fun action in it as well. I don't don't want to make it out that this is just like a totally boring book about society and queerness and society and kids finding their place. I just think that that's what makes it so strong. And maybe I wouldn't love this as much if I hadn't been reading the story all along since the beginning. But this is totally, totally one of my favorite books. Going back one book, John Remy Argueta asking if you can jump into Turtles right at the beginning of this Jason Aaron run that began in 2024. Yes, do not feel like you have to read the 150 issues and honestly another 100 issues of tie-ins of that original series. Everything you need to know. I actually didn't read the last 20 issues of it because I just wasn't into it. Everything you need to know is introduced. Each of the turtles get their own individual perspective issue at the beginning of the run. And then there's an issue just to focus on New York City and everything that's been going on in New York. So it's a perfect reintroduction. Flavio MRP saying James Tynion is probably the best comics writer right now. Bunkmaster B saying Wynd, possibly an even better choice for 14 than Superman Unleashed. Can the Vamps and the Fairy finally get along? Yeah, and you know what? I was just saying before that interlude, would I love this as much if I hadn't been reading it all along? No. Even though this is the third miniseries in a row, the first one was 10 issues, then another 5, and this will be the final 5. This is very much the culmination. So a lot of my love of the series comes with the fact that I think that Tynion is putting it to bed in a really powerful way. If I was just picking this up now, I probably wouldn't love it as much, and that it requires that caveat. But my recommendation for this is a recommendation to start from the start and really love the entire thing. And also, just I love the art in it, and just so much. Okay. And we do revisit Wynd. It's not totally without Wynd, and we get some action that's still funny. There's this very funny vampire character that he befriends, and we've never seen really any like kind or sympathetic vampires all through this. So to see what the vampire society is like, and that's Wynd's part of the story, is he's stuck in the vampire kingdom, is actually really pleasing. And we know I love vampire stuff, so anytime we can go inside a vampire city and see how vampires live and the vampire economy is, I'm into it. Okay. Let's move on to number 13. We're so close to the top 10 now. And there are a couple surprises in the top 10, even if you've been following along closely with me all year. But let's do it while you're all still awake. Number 13 is Star Wars Jedi Knights. No book has surprised me more this year than this book because I did not think I could trust Mark Guggenheim. I've never really liked him writing comics before, but this is why I give every comic a chance. Nor was I particularly excited to read a pre-prequels book. I'm like, whatever, hasn't this ground already been tread? But no, this book, again, Guggenheim telling individual issue stories with slight threads that tie into a bigger plot. That's a way to keep me hooked. But also the art from Madibek Muzabakov, colored by Luis Guerrero here. We got to take a look. This is another one of these breakout artists. He's been around in the industry for a while. We're seeing him explode this year. It's not just that he can capture the likenesses of the familiar characters that we know from on screen, like Qui-Gon Jinn, played by Liam Neeson, of course. It's the whole world. It's the whole imaginative world. It's all of the Star Wars aliens. It's the paneling. And it's the way that Luis Guerrero is coloring him. This is lettered by Clayton Cowles. Every one of these issues has really shown us, and the thing I love about it is it's Jedi in the end of their decadent phase. They really think they could do it all. They can be a peacekeeping force. They can help people who need negotiation between trade empires at war. That kind of winds up shooting them in the foot at the beginning of Phantom of Madness, doesn't it? So it's showing Jedi that are overconfident, maybe overtaxed, maybe not seeing the chinks in their armor, including Yoda himself. And what a great likeness of Yoda and a great likeness of Samuel Jackson as Mace Windu here. Every one of these stories has been incredibly fun. Every one of these issues would totally work for you on its own. Every panel of art from Madibek Muzabakov has been ultimately extraordinary. Issue 3, which kind of bugged me a little bit, but it's not that it was a bad issue. They decided to tell entirely as single panel splash pages because that's how good Madibek Muzabakov is. Of course, when you have somebody like Raza available to do the cover art, you have him do the cover art. But I cannot express to you that this is the most fun I think I've ever had in a Star Wars comic book. And I think that's partially because it's just let Jedis be Jedis. We all want to see Jedi do Jedi stuff. I think that is, there are different corners of the Star Wars universe that appeals to us. Some of us want to see like the low fantasy, scrappy, Han Solo part of it. Some of us wanted like the mercenaries and thieves. Some of us want to see the intrigue of Andor. I really like that part too, but I also like Jedi. I think there's room for all of these things to have high achievement. And in terms of Jedi achievement, this is some of the most fun I've had with Jedi. I can't say that it's better than Andor, but it's better than anything I can remember with Jedi in quite some time. Really, really satisfying. Truly, truly spectacular art and colors. Now we come to number 12 as we get close and closer and closer to my top 10. And this is another surprise for me because this is not a character who I've loved a lot of books from for the past 5 years, but it makes me happy to see him this high. It is The Amazing Spider-Man, written by Joe Kelly, art from Pepe Larraz and John Romita Jr. The Pepe Larraz issues are colored by Marta Gracia, and we also, on the John Romita Jr. issues, have inks from Scott Hanna and colors from Marcio Menez. All of it is lettered by Joe Caramagna. This is absolutely just the most fun I've had reading Spider-Man in so long. It's not just because of the life that Pepe Larraz brings to it. It's the life that Joe Kelly brings to it. Peter Parker shouldn't come off as a total screw-up. The Parker luck doesn't mean he's bad at everything. And in that, when you write him as a total screw-up and you start to write him as an asshole, it's no fun to read him anymore. We want to see him succeed sometime. And this book gets that right. The opening arc shows him trying to put his life back together even while it's falling apart because he's been drugged as Spider-Man. So he's showing up for a new job on drugs as he's also trying to figure out who drugged him as Spider-Man. It inserts a really critical part of his youth when we remember, if you go back and read Silver Age Spider-Man, he was a little bit of an asshole originally in the book. And I think that that's because Stan Lee was just writing a teenager that would appeal to teenagers at that time. I think that's gotten lost a little bit over the years, and it's kind of been merged in with his Parker luck so that they're a little inseparable from each other. But I do think Peter Parker has become a better person. But this, as he reconnects with a childhood friend who gets him his new job, has him reflecting back on that asshole period of his childhood and getting some really great flashbacks that have sort of a Stand By Me qualities to them, but also gives us some of the best writing we've seen for Aunt May, weirdly, both in the present day and in these flashbacks, as Spider-Man is swinging all around the city, trying to figure out what this drug plot is and why he's been drugged. But as he's hallucinating scenes from his pre-Spider past with Aunt May and Uncle Ben that just add so much texture to his character. I also actually must talk positively about the colors from Marta Gracia, because when the action really heated up here, we really leaned into the primary colors of it all so that we really could see things explode off the page. These were not pages that were all stuck being gray. Really, we got yellows, we got blues, we got reds. We really had characters who popped off the page, so it'd be interesting to see them. And then also, and I say this week after week, I love a Spider-Man who's made to feel uncomfortable. So anytime a creepy villain lady licks his face, I am there. This Aunt May scene where Spider-Man, or pre-Spider-Man, Peter Parker is throwing up from his first taste of beer into the toilet, and she realizes that she has his captive attention just for this one time to have a heart-to-heart for him. This was maybe my favorite Aunt May and Peter scene that I've ever read. I would buy this page and hang it on the wall. It's just such a phenomenal page that's something so true about these characters, so funny and so human. And then I assumed that this would plummet out of my top-rated comics because, by the way, great Norman Osborn stuff in this. While I love him as an ally you can just barely trust, but I also kind of assumed this was going to tank right out of my top 20 because of John Romita Jr. and his inconsistency on art. But no, the John Romita Jr. issue that snuck in right under my deadline for this rating, it was really good. Scott Hanna inks him without over-inking him. Marcio Menez colors him with doing color holds so his lines don't totally take over the page. And all of a sudden, and much to my surprise, we got a very smooth version of John Romita Jr. that didn't take me out of this book. Now, granted, if there was no alternation with John Romita Jr., this would probably be in my top 10. I just don't love his art as much as I love Pepe Larraz's art. But how could I love somebody else's art as much as I love Pepe Larraz's art? But the fact that it didn't knock this book down and I still love this issue and still have a positive recommendation index on this shows you how strong John Romita's game is on it, how strong his collaborators are on it, and how strong the writing has been from Joe Kelly. All right, folks, we're on the verge of the top 10. Do you know what's about to happen here? Let's look at number 11. It's a book that I've had many people tell me I would enjoy, and I've had no chance to catch up. It came out with a new miniseries this year, and I thought, you know what? Let's give it a try. And this book, without knowing anything else about its world, totally captured my imagination. It is a 3-issue miniseries of Mouse Guard, Dawn of the Black Axe. It is words and colors from David Peterson and artwork from the truly phenomenal Gabriel Rodriguez. I don't know anything about these damn mice, okay? I don't know a single darn thing about them. I don't know what their story is, what their world's about. All I know is Bunkmaster thinks I'll like it. That's all I know about it. But that's fine, because this is set in the past, and it shows how one mouse becomes a hero of the assembled mouse culture because he wields a very special axe, the Black Axe, to defeat the group of serpents that have been ringing in their mouse society and picking off their mice, their brethren, their cities, their towns, slowly encircling them. And so he knows he's got to go out in the world and sacrifice his own comfort and his own well-being to begin to make a hole in the ring of serpents that rings around them. And he is advised by the great glowing spirit elk or moose that appears to all of the mice. So we get some good snake action, but we kind of just get that kind of tired old warrior action, this guy who's a knight that's out for one last quest. And I love that Gabriel Rodriguez draws them as mice. Like, they are anthropomorphized, they do walk around on 2 feet, but if you look at the anatomy of them, the way he draws their faces, their ears, their hands, their tail, their feet, they're mice. They're actual mice. We're not just turning them to like cuddly Sonic the Hedgehog characters, which is a part of what really works for this. It really feels like mice out on the yard, you know, much like Bug Wars has this whole universe that's built around mites in the yard. This feels like a whole unseen world of mice. And I love that at the end, it comes down not just to the mice doing it for himself, but the mouse trying to understand the motivation of the serpents. This could not be a better advertisement for me to go and read Mouse Guard. As I was pulling together my pulls I want to read, it's currently almost up to 600 runs of past runs from 1935 to the present day that I've always wanted to read. It's over 20,000 single issues. Mouse Guard was in the 200 or 300s. After reading this, it rocketed up the list because if there is more of this to read, I need to read it. So let me just get some comments reacting to that. James Abel, Mouse Guard time. Bunk, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. One Wheel Tracks going backward and saying, wow, JR art looks amazing on that Spider-Man issue. Bunk's ready to go now. He knows I already don't like the other things he likes, and he's seen his Mouse Guard, so he doesn't care about the top 10. Renee's Spawn, Bunks just screamed into his pillow and scared his dog. Super Job could hear him over here. Hank saying, I miss the days of Al Williamson inking JR. Never thought Claus Johnson was a good fit, but I'm surprised at how much I love the thinner and cleaner lines. John Ramiro Argueta, Mouse Guard sweep. I love Mouse Guard so much. I literally had never heard of this before we did the Evergreen Library stream last year on Near Mint Condition. Like, I was aware of it, but I just thought it was like some like YA book or something. Like, I had no idea what it was or what it was about, or that there was so much of it, or that it was so highly regarded. But who knows? I mean, maybe the rest of it's not going to stand up to that for me now because that was so good. Maybe I'm going to read like the present day Mouse Guard stuff and been like, it could be better. I almost made a mistake. I almost made a critical mistake. All right, hold on. Now we finally come to the top 10. And if you've been watching my pull list show regularly, you have an idea of what the top 10 is, but you don't know. You don't know. And so that's why we're doing it. Here's number 10. This is a book I've been pleading with you to read all this year, and it's one of the books that benefits from my policy of starting this from December data, because it only had 3 issues in 2024. That means anybody who's doing a best of list in 2024 probably didn't write about it because they'd only read through its November issue. That's just 2. And it's only had 2 issues in 2025, so nobody's going to put it on their best of list this year, which is crazy to me because it is absolutely one of the best books of the year. It is GhostBox by Mike Carey. Yes, that Mike Carey. Art from Pablo Ramon, colors from Jose Villarrubia. This was a book that to me felt like absolutely classic Vertigo comics. And that Vertigo always had a book with a big, audacious concept that often connected to some kind of religion or mythology, but showed how small people in the world moved throughout that world. And so in this world, we get a pair of sisters who think they're just going to go thrifting and find this ghost box that absorbs the souls of anybody who dies near it. But that means that also they can advise the person in possession of it. And that means a huge devilish cult of people on this world want to grab a hold of it and all of the knowledge it contains and entails. And it also makes you think, what made the box this way? It turns out it's powered by an angel power in the middle of it. And sorry, YouTube, you can see a little glimpse of Angel Peen if you zoom in on this particular page far enough. So I don't want to spoil the ending of it because so much was the setup of this, but this, again, like, this gave me, it's Mike Carey, so of course it makes you think of Lucifer, but it just reminds me of the excitement of like reading a Vertigo comic from the 90s or the early 2000s and being like, wow, what is this cool, audacious vision of Transmet, of Sandman, of like all of those classic books of magic Swamp Thing. Like, it just is audacious in the way those books are audacious. And I want to read 100 issues of it. Books that I love this much that just makes me want to read their world endlessly. I value so highly. You can read this for free if you have Amazon Prime. Do you know that? If you have Amazon Prime in America, you can read the Comixology originals for free. But I might actually buy this in collected edition. And I really, really hope that there's an economy that allows Mike Carey to do more of it. Because as far as I'm concerned, Mike Carey should be writing every comic book. And I am just obsessed with this book. Flavio saying, Mike Carey doing comics again. John Remy saying, Mike Carey wrote my favorite comic run of all time, so I gotta support his comic return. It's on Comixology. It's right there for you. Lance has have to come back and watch this from the beginning tomorrow. Yeah, it's part of this was so fun for people like Lance, like Superjob, like John Remy, who like watched the Polish show every week, like James Abel. I wanted to make sure there were some fun surprises, and I wanted to get a chance to talk for more than just a minute about what some of these books have been able to put together over the course of this year. So there was a version of this that I planned where I was going to have the timer and only do a minute of time at the time. And I said, you know what? No, even if the stream is long, I want this to be a lasting artifact of how great comic books were in 2025. And speaking of how great they are, I love when a comic book can come out and surprise you with a weird concept. Sometimes you see a strange concept for a miniseries and you go, that peanut butter and jelly doesn't go together at all. But this peanut butter and jelly did. It's Doctor Strange of Asgard, written by Derek Landy, art from Carlos Magno, the best he has ever looked. And part of this is because of the colors from Espen Guttenjern and letters here from Corey Petit. This book has a spectacular concept right from the start, which is Doctor Strange can't be the Sorcerer Supreme on Earth anymore because Doom is. So where else can he go to be Sorcerer Supreme, both so he has access to the level of magic he's used to, but also so that he can at some point stand up against Doom if Doom tries to expand into other planets or realms. And so Strange chooses Asgard because there's an opening for the position in Asgard. But the thing that this does so well, and why Derek Landy truly is a secret weapon at Marvel right now, is that it goes to the street level of Asgard. This is not just about Thor and Sif, although they appear. This gets into who are running the taverns in Asgard, who are the doctors in Asgard, who are fighting trolls to get the magical artifacts that power the spells of Asgard. And Doctor Strange is wading through all of that. And the thing I really love about it is I like books that are about Doctor Strange's specificity, about his obsession. That's how he was as a surgeon. That's how he is as a magician. I almost think he's a little bit neurodivergent coded in the way he gets so hyper focused on things. And I like to see that come through in a plot. And it absolutely comes through here. But as he's getting embroiled in Asgard society to try to win their trust to be their Sorcerer Supreme, he also gets embroiled in a murder there and a plot that involves Loki, although Loki may not be the cause of it. This art, I cannot say enough. I feel like I've been dropped in the middle of like a modern day version of Prince Valiant or something like that. Carlos Mango's, I sometimes have trouble with his line weights or his character standing out from the background, but with the way that it's being colored here by Espen Guttenjern, I've never seen it look this magnificent. This is one of those books where every single book I screenshot like 5 or 6 pages and then I have to sit here and whittle it down to just 2 or 3 pages that I'm going to show. But the real sell for me is that this is about a world of Asgard that just feels so real and street level and lived in a way that I have never seen an Asgard book do. Through all of the issues of Thor I have paged through for my Jane Foster guides, for my Valkyrie guides, I've never seen a version of Asgard like this, and I've never seen it look this good. And it's a good Doctor Strange story, and it's a good mystery story. This book has it all. I love it. John Romero Argueta. I will go read it after this. This understood, sir. Yes, sir. I don't know if that's about the GhostBox or about this one, but hopefully it's about both. And hello to Jaegernaut is it Jaggernaut or Jaegernaut? I tend to want to say Jaegernaut because I think of my days of drinking Jaeger. Okay, wow, yeah, the art in this book, love it so much. Okay. But wow, I took so many pages that I'm done talking and I should have been going through the pages even faster. Carlos Mango really makes everybody look like they're from like some elegant 1940s movie. I feel like he must do all of his character work all from like Cary Grant era movie stars. Okay, now we're up to number 8. And if you've been watching me regularly, you know that I've been growing and growing in my love for this book, perhaps unexpectedly because I wasn't sure if it was going to deliver great things, but it has been. And much like seeing Spider-Man at the top of our polls, I love to see Batman doing well. I don't even have allegiance to those two characters, but I just think the industry is a good industry when the biggest heroes have the best books. I just think that's a good thing. I'm not saying I want the top 10 to be all Spider-Man, Batman, and Superman, but it makes me happy. So this is is Tom Taylor's run on Detective Comics. The first arc is with Mikkel Janin on art. The second arc is with Lee Garbett on art. Both of them masters and weirdly going together in a way that I did not think would be so great. Here's the thing that Tom Taylor did at the beginning that made me a little bit hesitant. He did this thing where he introduced some new parts of Batman backstory and Wayne family backstory in order to make this particular villain matter in the present. I am of the mind that I don't always need backstory retcons in order to make things work in Gotham, but he did it in a way that even though it introduced a new character that Bruce Wayne needed to have been aware of from his youth and from his parents, it didn't change the whole nature of Gotham. It kind of felt like it was something that was there in Gotham all along, so it didn't feel like that heavy of a lift. Plus, we already know that Tom Taylor loves the Bat family, so of course whenever they appear here, it's going to work really well. At points in this first arc, it really felt like this should have been the Batman and Robin book because Robin was being used so well, which is not to say that he can't be used well in Detective Comics. I actually think Detective Comics should be the Batman book that has the most of the Batman family in it. But Mikkel Janin, I'm just an easy mark for his art. I love the way he draws. I love the way his figures have weight. And I love that these colors didn't stay in kind of the normal zone of colors. It didn't stay with kind of like dull, boring colors. It got fantastical as Batman deals with the idea of somebody who's offering long life but also preying on children. And as we know, when it comes to Bruce Wayne and Batman, he does not have the patience for people who prey on children. Some of these colors as the series went on are by Alex Guimarães, not just by Mikkel Janin himself, and it's lettered by Wes Abbott. And so that came to a very satisfying conclusion. And by the way, some amazing colors from Mikkel Janin. And then we rolled on to the Lee Garbett story, which continues the story of this secret group that's been in Gotham, but it starts to look at it from a different perspective, from the police officer perspective, as he's been investigating them and gets tangled up in them. And also Batman gets tangled up in it. And also improbably it winds up with Penguin tied up in them as well. And the art continues to be just as stunning. This is, I believe, if I got my issue right, a Lee Garbett page, but this is like Lee Garbett drawing with so much more detail and form than we've often seen from him. And I love Lee Garbett. I love him on Skyward. I love him on Loki, Agent of Asgard, but I feel like this is a evolution of his art. And let me just get who the colorist is on Lee Garbett. It is Lee Luffridge on the colors there. But then also we had one spectacular annual. Not a lot of comic books with annuals out this year. You know what? Maybe that was still a Mikkel Janin page. I might have had it in the wrong order. But anyway, whether or not it was, we haven't had a lot of fantastic annuals this year, but this Al Ewing Batman annual was absolutely fantastic. It had a really clever backup story by Joshua Hale Fialkov. Where has he been in the industry? But you could just pick this up and read it on its own. It has nothing to do with the main Detective Comics arc, but it's still part of the volume, and I loved it so much. All right, now we come to number 7 in our top 10. And this is another book that may surprise you and I think might be off of some people's list because it's been a little bit spread out as it's been released. And so people kind of forgot about it. I actually forgot about it and had not caught up on it until people in the comments were like, you might really like this, Krisis. It is Tin Can Society from Peter Warren, Francesco Mobley, and Chris Chukri for Rick Remender's Giant Generator. The way I would pitch this book to you, it is an indie version of Tony Stark. And it's a Tony Stark who is a black man, who is a disabled man, and who builds his company from scratch and all the technology from scratch, but nobody really, I forget, do they know that he's a superhero? I think they do know that he's a superhero. And so it's got like a little bit of a Mr. Terrific vibe, but this starts with his death. He's dead, he's gone. And so all of his friends that were his kind of friend group that he fell out with as he became the most rich and famous of them are trying to come together and figure out what went on with his company, what went on with his death, what went on with the suit that they all know to be his super suit that they've been talking to him about his whole life since they first were together. It has really wild to follow action. I don't know how many comics I've read from Francesco Mobley, but he's actually incredible here. And I love both the present day and the past day story that are occurring here. And this is the theme through a lot of the books in this list, is that if you're going to split time, both of the stories have to hold an interesting amount of narration and mystery with them. So in this case, we're using his relationship with each of his individual friends in this group to tell parts of the story of how he became famous, how he became rich, how he became sort of a superhero. And then we focus on their banding back together in the modern day to kind of figure out what happened to their friend that they became estranged from. This is an absolutely phenomenal book. I think it'll really, really surprise and delight you. If you have not been reading it, I can't really say that it's like anything else. It's a little bit like Matt Fraction's Iron Man, but it's really not a lot like anything else that's on the market right now. And it's got really, really fantastic art and a pretty cool central mystery. Okay, now we come to a book that is so outside of my normal things that I love, but I love everything about it. It is Jump Scare by Cullen Bunn, Danny Luckert, lettered by Joshua Reed. First of all, we got to talk about Danny Luckert as another one of these artists who I don't know where he's been or why I haven't been reading him, but this book is spectacular. But we also have to talk about Cullen Bunn, who has really carved out a name for himself doing scary books. And this is a different kind of scary book because this is a scary superhero book. It starts out with this idea that this young woman in the city where there's a lot of monsters unleashed from weird energy that came to this world as established by an OGN that I still haven't read from 2024. You don't need the background, but she gets a superpower from it that makes her a different kind of monster. She's a horror movie serial killer, but she's a serial killer for good. She's using her ability to summon up all the iconic weapons of serial killers from the ether in order to defend the city and defeat the monsters that are plaguing the city and its people. And also she's having maybe a little bit too much fun while she is doing it. So there's a lot of really satisfying stuff to come from the first couple of issues of this as we just get used to this idea of a hero, and she's definitely a hero. There's nothing anti-hero or well, she is a vigilante, but she's not an anti-hero. She's doing good things. She's protecting people. She's not doing anything bad, but she's doing it with murder weapons. There's just something so funny about that. It's such a brilliant concept. But there are things surrounding her in this world that are affecting her that we are starting to see press in towards her. She comes from this very conservative family who wants no part of this monstrous world, and so she's estranged from them, but she still loves her little sister very, very much, which pulls her back into this conflict. And she's finding that these monsters are not all the same kind of monster. Some of them are preying upon others. Some of them are collecting others. There might be a ruling council. There might be a hierarchy of monsters. And she's realizing that as the series goes on, she is a monster, and so she is part of this world and she's part of this hierarchy. And once you yourself realize that you're a monster, you start to look at other monsters a different way, which I think is actually a really powerful metaphorical statement for the real world without this being an all metaphors book. Like, this is a book that's very much about physical, tangible action. Sometimes a couple of the issues were just all action, and yet it's underlaid with this metaphor of, like, if you recognize you're a little bit of a monster, all the monsters around you start looking a little bit more like people. And so I think there's something really interesting there. And again, I just cannot get over that she's a superhero that's a serial killer, or at least using the powers of serial killers. But Danny Luckert's art, there's nothing else you're going to find like this, especially with him coloring himself. The way that the things stand out from the panels, the way he just makes it all look so huge and vivid, the crazy range of colors he's using. This really is something remarkable and completely different than anything else you can read anywhere in the industry. It is all of its own. One Wheelchair X saying, Mobili's art has grown so much from these pages since their work on Hickman's X-Men. James Abel didn't expect me to put Jump Scare quite so high. And John Romeo Argueta says, issue 1 didn't hit for me on Jump Scare, despite me being a sucka, huge horror nerd. I thought you were saying a sucka for horror. Such a huge horror nerd. I need to give it another shot and see if it picks up for me. And again, now that we're into my top 10, these are books where there's been no weak issue. I have no apologies to make. It's been all fantastic. Okay. Oh, just what an iconic page with her. And every time she pulls one of these weapons, a little movie ticket comes up that says what movie it's from. They're all made up movies, so there's no copyright issues. So this is The Annihilator's Flamethrower from The Annihilator, 1980. Love that. Love every convention about this book. Oh, let's jump right into number 5, shall we? It is Solomon Kane, another Titan Comics comic book. And I love it so much. This is a real work of art, written, drawn, and colored by Patrick Zurcher, although he didn't on a color assist eventually, and it is lettered by Richard Starkings and Tyler Smith once again. I don't know anything about Solomon Kane. I don't have any interest in Solomon Kane. I have no Solomon Kane, but I come to find out that he's kind of just this traveling do-gooder slash mercenary slash adventurer, and he makes a mistake. He makes a mistake right off the bat here, and in the middle of a pirate ship brawl, he kills somebody maybe he shouldn't have killed. And so he's left with a letter from this person, and he decides to take it upon itself to deliver that letter to its recipient, who lives in Venice, Italy, in a little bit of a Jewish ghetto there inside of Venice with his daughter. And this man is an academic, but he's also an academic of the supernatural. And because of the content of the letter that Solomon Kane delivers, they go on an adventure down the coast of Africa to look into the world that this artifact has been discovered in, the Serpent Ring. And this just allows Zurcher to show such range. I mean, we've seen him do interesting stuff before. We've seen him do beautiful stuff before on Savage Avengers when Conan was in it. His art was absolutely incredible, but we've never seen him draw this level of society, so many different things, from the streets and the boats and the buildings of Venice to, you know, this witch doctor, to the, you know, the landscapes of Africa. And I will say that, like, anytime anybody's going to Africa and it's like the dark continent, I start to raise my eyebrows a little bit, like, is this going to be super racist? I mean, the Middle Ages and the Renaissance were super racist, but like, do we have to bring that aspect into the story in a way that's part of the story? But no, actually, this kind of makes a lot of commentary about, like, these people were doing fine on their own, and it was kind of the appearance of the missionary there and the missionary maybe being corrupted by the serpent ring that creates problems for them. I usually have a certain sort of character blindness when it comes to comics like this that are just set with, they don't have any superheroes, they only have one main titled character. I couldn't tell you what any of these characters' names are, but I know who they all are, I know who their personalities are, and as they adventure down the coast and they get into this world that's increasingly supernatural as they're drawn towards the center of the demonic serpent possession of the serpent wing, I just find that I'm so invested in all of their fates, and I really do see them as so different from each other. Paul Gundam says, a well-written Solomon Kane story absolutely rocks. Stoop saying, this list is epic. Jean-Remy Argueta saying, I picked up Solomon Kane based on my rec. I didn't even know it was an already established character. It's so good. And I want to get back and dive deeply into this character. Probably less racist than the original Howard stories, and that is the key. Super job. Yeah, the thing is, I could not tell you this guy from Adam. Actually, I think he kind of looks weirdly like a cross between, what did I say? Cillian Murphy, Johnny Depp, and Nick Cage. He just looks like this perfect blend between the three of them, the way that he's drawn. But yeah, Zurcher is delivering career best stuff here. And again, it's really hard to find a writer-artist who's not only good, but good at writing stuff for themselves to draw that's going to be interesting. And this absolutely does the trick. I've been talking for 3.5 hours almost, y'all. But yeah, and this is with colors not by Zurcher, and the step down in quality is ever so slight, which is not to say anything bad about the colorist on this book. It's just a little bit less texture in the colors, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all about this. And that, let me just zoom in on that. Hold on, so I can give credit where credit is due. He's getting an assist from Pete Pantazis on those colors. And so it's very much of a piece with the existing palette. It's just got a little bit of a textural difference. Okay, and this page, I mean, the ability to just do this epic stuff. And I think I'm finding this is what I really like about the Robert E. Howard world. I always wanted to be a little supernatural. I never wanted to be played totally straight. All right, folks, we're really getting into my absolute favorite comics of the year. We're into the top 4. And I know a lot of you who watch me regularly know what number 1 is, but if you have not been watching religiously the past 4 weeks, you will not know that this series crept in not only to the top 10, but the top 4. It is Out of Alcatraz by Christopher Cantwell, illustrated and lettered by Tyler Crook. This book is doing something so phenomenal, and it feels like Christopher Cantwell, who is a screenwriter who wrote a fantastic TV series called Halt and Catch Fire that I'm a big fan of, he could have pitched this to a network. This could have been a miniseries, but it doesn't feel like a rejected TV script that's a comic book. It feels very specific to what can be done with the narrative abilities of comics, and it really shows me the growth of Cantwell, who I've been reading in comics now for almost a decade, and I really think his capabilities of a writer has really grown, and he's got an amazing partner in Tyler Crook here. The way I've been explaining this to people, because I've been proselytizing to people about this even outside of comics, I think it's that good of a story, and I think it could play to people all, once it's in a graphic novel, I think it's going to be one of those things that gets recommended as like graphic novels as literature. It reminds me of the story of Mad Men, where we see the background of Don Draper, that Don Draper has this whole hidden life that nobody's fully aware of, and that's been slowly revealed over the course of the series, because that's what this is. It's about the real life breakout of 4 people from Alcatraz who are all considered to be drowned in the San Francisco Bay, but it's supposing what if some of them lived. And so it starts to ask the question about, how did they get out? How did they plan it? Who were they working with on the outside? Where were they going to go from here? They knew they would be the most wanted men in the country. And what is it like for them to be freed again? But this story and the series really plays with the idea of being inside and being outside. Even if you're not physically inside somewhere, are you still on the outside? Because as criminals, as fugitives, they're still on the outside. We see this guy goes to a grocery store, and he just wants to buy stuff. He just is so happy to be out of prison, out in the world again. But then they're on the outside of this society, and they're looking in, and their partner on the outside, who's helping coordinate for them, also is an outsider looking in a way, because we learn that she's an African-American woman who's very light-skinned and passes for white, and her ability to pass lets her get into social situations she normally wouldn't be accepted in, but it's also turned her into a criminal, not because she ever had any criminal intent, but people have assumed criminal intent from her because she faked being white. She never faked being white. She was just being herself. She even checked on a form that she was African American, but people thought she was trying to use her whiteness as power, and so she got in legal trouble about it, and now she's living a life she never asked for, where she has to be a merciless criminal, and she's a pretty hard case throughout this, but as we get to know her more and more, we start to realize that she too is a dynamic character. But that's not all, because we also have, as they're working their way through California to try to move up north and get these guys farther away from the Alcatraz area where they might be recognized, we have these two federal agents, and I think one of them's FBI, one of them's a federal marshal, and they used to work together, and we find out that they are both gay, which is something that would not keep them employed by the government in this age in the 1960s. And so the two of them are now getting back together, and not only are they rekindling their partnership as investigators, they're talking about rekindling their love connection, but they know there's no way they're going to be able to keep that up within the FBI, so they are also on the outside looking in. They're like, we could have this. We could be together. What if we just went off and did our thing? And one of them is saying that, the other one says, and how long until they nail our queer asses to the wall? Because clearly they do not want to have queer men in the FBI in this. They would be rooted out, and so they're just staring into the distance and wondering, is this the kind of place where you can get a cabin with the one you love and watch the world go by, away from the looks and the whispers and the hiding? And the other one says, in one of my favorite panels of this entire year, that just sounds like a different kind of hiding. So there are just so many layers going on to this story, and it really just feels like it could be an amazing television series. Maybe at some point it will, but I'm very satisfied with it as a comic. And I know I've been talking all about the writing, but that's because Tyler Crook is treating these characters like actors. I mean, they really show up, hit their mark, and deliver emotion every time he draws them, but we still get comic booky moments like this one of her cracking this bottle over his head that you just couldn't show the same way on TV. So this is not just a failed TV script, it's something more, and it's something I'm so happy that got brought to this medium. Yeah, I do think the covers have been very Hitchcock in their influence, and so that's been very interesting to me, because I think it was maybe expecting something else from the book at first, but also it's just very of the period. I love all the kind of pop art touches that really set this very much in the 60s. Lance McNair saying, not a comic, but I just finished East of Eden about an hour ago. Such a powerful, sweeping book. I'm still stumped by it and processing all my thoughts. John Remy Argueta's trade waiting for this. Logan Wade really wants to read this. Stoop saying, I still say Star Trek Defiant is a great book. I haven't read it because I don't read Star Wars or Star Trek. I do read Star Wars. I don't read Star Trek. Yeah, once this comes out, this will be one of those rare indie books that I will buy in physical format, even though I've bought every issue digitally, even though I don't have a lot of physical stuff in this house, because I will read it all the time, and I will absolutely be lending it and recommending it to other people. Okay, folks, we've reached now my top 3. And I think if you know me and you've been following this channel, you know what every one of these top 3 books is going to be, but let's do it for the culture. So number 3 is Batman Dark Patterns. This book, if you have not been reading it, and I think everybody who regularly watches this channel have been reading it by now, you need to go out and find it. This is very much a year 1.5, year 2 Batman story told about his early days of trying to understand how he fits into Gotham and what Gotham's crime says about Gotham. Are there patterns in that darkness? It is written by Dan Watters, and I've liked Dan Watters in a lot of books, but this is, I think, the best book I've ever read from him. And again, Hayden Sherman. Their art is so spectacular here, from the covers to the interiors, just absolutely, absolutely stunning stuff. Colored on the interiors by Triana Farrell, lettered by Frank Sedovic. The way that this is structured is that every 3 issues are their own case. So we started the year already with a case that began of the Wound Man, which is kind of a medieval legend of a man who's been wounded in every kind of way except for the way that would kill him. And Batman discovers him and has to fight him, but also have to understand why is he wounded and like this, which takes Batman to upstate Gotham. And I do so love when Batman is juxtaposed with a suburban street rather than a grimy Gotham street. But this, in a very similar way to the Green Arrow book, kind of investigates what makes the monsters of our world, what motivates the killers of our world, and Batman deciding who is truly the one who is causing the thing here. Is it the monster, or is it the people who made the monster? That's the first arc of this book, and I love anytime Batman's got a creepy crawly cape. I really think Hayden Sherman is just drawing him in such a spectacular way. Then the second arc is called The Voice of the Tower, and it is all about a tower that has been barricaded. It has been occupied by somebody who is possibly a murderer, possibly possibly has a cop taken hostage. And so Gordon calls in Batman, but we discover that the tower has its own voice, its own personality, and its own culture in a very early run-in with one of Batman's kind of more cartoonish supernatural villains, but used in a very, very different way here. What you will find throughout the series is Hayden Sherman's page layouts are very much part of the patterns. He's always trying to draw shapes. In the first arc, the shapes were sometimes a little bit more organic, or sometimes they were sharp or angled to go with the sharpness of the Wound Man. In the second arc, they are very architectural. Here we see him using this guy looking out the door as the panel dividers of him looking out the door as Batman moves through this living tower, encountering all of the people inside of it, trying to figure out the secret and how to unlock it of what is going on there. Here's his creepy crawly cape again. And then finally, we come to the beginning of a new third arc, as this series did get extended to 12 issues, as Batman finds somebody who has been burned to death, but even that is more than it seems to be. And so he realizes he's going to have to go deeper into the bowels of Gotham to understand if this is the case of an existing crime recurring. And this is where Dan Watters starts to draw the different arcs of this book together, because Batman starts to wonder himself if he's seeing too many patterns in what's out there, and that is he suffering from the psychological phenomena of seeing patterns where there are not. But I think the trick is, for us as readers, we know the patterns of Batman. Batman's dark patterns represents Batman's histories in comic books ever since he first debuted as a character. There is a darkness inherent in Gotham. That's why we have so many Batman comic books. But to see him try to decide, is there something that connects these cases? Is there something just to Gotham? There are very few books where the entire creative team, and I very much include Triana Farrell on colors and Frank Sedovic on letters here, are working in such concert as this book. This is truly a Batman book for the ages. This is the way that it felt like when you first cracked Batman Long Halloween, first read Batman Year One, first read a Batman by Neil Adams issue. That's the level of execution of this book. Nobody who is hyping it up is overhyping it. There is no way to overhype it, because nobody is achieving at this level on Batman right now. Let's go to my number 2 comic book of the year so far. And this is, hold on, I'm getting my notes in front of me, a book that came out of nowhere from an author I don't always love, although I greatly, greatly respect and share a lot of taste with. And I think he is delivering what, for me, is the first perfect comic book I've seen from him in almost a decade, because I frequently talk about how one of his past comic books is a perfect comic book that I would teach in a college class about comic books, which is 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank. This is another slice of perfection from Matthew Rosenberg. It is called We're Taking Everyone Down With Us. It is art from Stefano Landini, colors from Jason Wordie, making another appearance here on the countdown. We saw him previously on Kaya, and letters from Hassan Otsmane Elhal. I love, this is just twisted. It's so unique. I love an indie book that's completely in its own lane. It starts out with the daughter of a supervillain. She lives on his supervillain island, surrounded by his supervillain robots. So it's kind of got like a mad scientist vibe. It's kind of got a Doctor Doom vibe, but she doesn't know her dad's a supervillain. Kids love their parents at this age, at age 11. And so she's kind of annoyed with the robots always nannying her around the island, but she doesn't get that her dad is evil. But that's because we're looking at this world through a filter of her viewpoint. But we're also in a world where James Bond-like super spy exists, and that spy is Rook. And Rook has finally got a chance, let's actually go back to that other page, has finally got a chance for his agency to get the jump on her dad, the supervillain, but they move forward without him, and it all becomes a big mess. And so she has to flee with one of the robots by her side into the rest of the world, and she discovers that her father was actually part of this cadre of supervillains, a council of supervillains, although he had kind of been on the outs, which lets us believe maybe he'd become a little bit sympathetic, or maybe he was building something big and world building and world crushing, and he did not want them to find out about it. Check out this 15 panel page. You don't see that too often. And so now she's trying to leave the island. She winds up out in the world, and she's got this killer robot who's basically kind of a Doombot protecting her from the world as she's trying to make a connection with some of these other supervillains, at the same time that Rook is going back and basically James Bonding all over the place. But this takes a very ironic view of Rook as James Bond, to be like, what if James Bond was an alcoholic? What if he was always high on Quaaludes? And what if the agency actually hated him for how much he wound up costing him by going going kind of off the plan so often and causing all the wreckage that he causes. Here, there's a meeting where somebody gets so angry that he pulls this thing. The best we can tell, this is some kind of brainwave storage machine. Our technicians are a bit stumped, and he just throws it across the room and he says, Virgin Mary's tits and all this is lost, and you lost it. I love it. It has so many unique elements to it. It's so upside down to look at this world through the vision of a supervillain and then the vision of his daughter, that it's just a book that I absolutely love. It's going to be one complete series, although because you will note that these covers have a little tab on them that says a Rook spy thriller. It feels like even though we resolved potentially the story of this little girl and her supervillain dad, we may continue looking at the world of Rook, and I'd be very much for that. I think Rosenberg, who's written a lot of great series both at Marvel and DC and on his own, but none of them clicked for me on the level of Four Kids Walk Into the Bank onto this one. And well, if you've been watching this channel, you know what I have at number 1, and it is FML from Kelly Sue DeConnick, David Lopez, Chris Peter, and Clayton Cowles. Not any comic for me came close to touching it at all this year, even though we only, in the frame of what I'm rating this on, had 2 issues, because issue 5 just came out a few weeks ago after my deadline for this half year. But there was an issue out in December, so this is a book that benefits from having a December issue out in order of its average. I cannot possibly dispute a single thing about this book, but now I'm here to pitch it to you. So this book is about a family that is pretty much the Fraction DeConnick family. If you didn't know, Kelly Sue DeConnick is married to Matt Fraction. They have 2 very hilarious kids that I've seen grow up on their Instagram over the course of the past decade, and the 2 kids in this book are very much their 2 kids. You will know them as characters if you've ever followed them on social media, but it's not literally an autobio comic. So it does have a mom who is a cartoonist who is working on her next book, but she's also into true crime, as an older son who's trying to make waves with his death metal band, but they get into the wrong kind of death metal and he turns himself into a giant monster. And with those giant monster paws, it's going to be a lot harder to play bass. And his mischievous younger sister who is always lingering at the edges. And what's really interesting is that this is just a family book. There's no one thing it's about. It's not just about the kid and his band. It's not just about the band playing death metal. It's not just about the mom and the mom making comic books. It's not about how the mom's friend was murdered when she was younger and she's always had PTSD about losing her friend, and that now there's maybe the chance to find her friend's killer. And so that draws her back into this with all of her kind of feminist book club friends in the present. We've never seen David Lopez drawing like this before. And Kelly Sue DeConnick and Lopez together are really playing with this idea of different levels of art. Sometimes we go down to kind of a sketching level just on plain paper. Sometimes it really explodes into like manga style art. Sometimes it's just in the typical David Lopez style art. Sometimes we get these crazy pop art montages because we're dealing with this character who's a loosely disguised Kelly Sue DeConnick who is dealing with her intense PTSD, but also the trauma of just living in this world today. It has some of the best parenting stuff that I've seen. It's got some of the best stuff about kind of psychology and people who are working through their problems that I've seen in any book this year. And it's got some great music stuff from somebody who's clearly a big music fan and a big music lover. And here is that moment where it kind of briefly turns into a Junji Ito manga book. It's such a weird book that it's so hard to recommend because it's so many different things at once, but it really is. It's just a story about family and about trying to get over the things that are scary in your world, and that sometimes scary is good, whether that's confronting the thing that's scary to you or learning how to play the bass when you're a monster with monster hands. And what I love is that he's just treated as normal. Like, he's a monster. His mom, like, he's still living in the house. He's still eating breakfast. He's still in his band. It's just so hilarious and so funny all along. And then there's also these great moments about what it's like to parent a kid who's getting older. He says, I'm going to bed. And she says, good call. I'm going to clean up a little. I'll be right behind you. Oh, you never told me about your show. How did it go? It was good. Look, I know you're trying to help, but I'm tired. Can I just go to bed? And then we flash to what she's seeing in her mind. Of course, to her, this child of hers is just this beating heart that's walking around outside of her body. And we see that as kids go older, you lose that tenuous thread of connection where they tell you everything about every day and all they're feeling every day, because they are starting to become their own whole person with their whole personality. And that means they have more agency than you. And when you say sleep tight, it hits different when you put them to bed. And that's absolutely something that I know from being a parent as well. So of all of my favorite comic books this year, at the midpoint of the year, nothing has quite touched my love of FML by Kelly Sue DeConnick, David Lopez, Chris Peter, and Clayton Cowles, with design from Lauren McCubbin. And it is absolutely fantastic. It has editing from Daniel Chabon, an assistant. Oh no, that's at the Dark Horse level, sorry. But there is an editor of this book in specific, and I was trying to credit them and I just got carried away. So you have now seen my complete top 60. No, we are not going through them all again because I don't even actually have them all in one file that I could go through all again. And of course, none of you were surprised by that if you've been watching the show, because I've been saying that FML is my favorite comic. It literally has not dropped out of the #1 spot since the first week of this year. But there has been some other movement. Dark Patterns found its way through the top 10. And so did Out of Alcatraz Rising Up. You will notice that one regular book that was in my top 10 was not in this stream. That book was Nice House by the Sea, right? Not by the lake. By the lake's the first one. And that's because you needed a minimum of 3 issues out to qualify to continue to be in my top ranking. And that actually only had 2 out. So a few things you've seen me talk about that have only had 2 issues out this year fell off of the ranking. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about which publishers have done the best. So let me give you a little bit of data, because you know that my saying is data or it didn't happen. Overall, out of every book I've read this year, Marvel has a total share, and this is including their Star Wars stuff, of 31.8% of the series. Or actually, is that the issue? No, it's the individual series. It has 31.8%. Altogether, that has accounted for 565 comics. However, in the top 60, they only account for 27%. So they're ever so slightly underrepresented compared to how many series I've read from them. Now, DC has a relatively slim amount in the overall top 500 of just, let me just make sure that's right. That number looks a little bit off. No, that's right. DC overall has only represented 15.6% of my reading. But in the top 60, they're in it just as much as Marvel at 27%. So while those of you who have been counting all along have been saying, wow, Marvel and DC seem to be here equally, DC is basically represented 2 times as much as you might expect them to be represented. And then the other of the big 3, Image, and this is all of Image's imprints. Altogether, Image is 16.7% of the reading that I've done so far this year. But in the top 60, Image only represents 7%. So Image is way, way underrepresented in the top 60. And that is hugely because a lot of the Image I read is Todd McFarlane Productions, but they only got 1 Spawn Universe book into the top 60. But now let's not just talk about numbers. And I'm sorry, I should have done slides for this, but I cannot tell you how long it took to get all of those 880 images together that you saw both in the slides and also my credits on the backstage. So I didn't have time to put this together as numbers. But now I want to talk about one final thing before we wrap up, and then I'll see your final comments, which is my top publishers of this year so far. So I have this recommendation index of how likely I would be to recommend a series. So FML is one of my relatively few series that has a 100% recommendation index. All of the things that were in the top 10 at a 100% or higher than a 75% recommendation index, which means almost every issue individually was recommendable, so the whole series was recommendable. That's what makes my top 10. That's why there's a lot of great books that I really, really like are out of my top 10. And also, that's why there's some books that you're like, wow, that seemed high, like Doom Academy, but it's just because every issue is easy to recommend, and that has a lot of power in my algorithm. So what about at the publisher level? Would I recommend Marvel as a publisher? No. Marvel's underwater right now. Their recommendation index is -36. I would have a hard time if you just picked a random Marvel comic off of the shelf and I asked, should I read this? I would have a hard time saying that. DC's overall recommendation index is a little bit stronger. It's only -19. So for a title group that I'm reading everything from, and that includes things that I've hated and even have had to drop or at least stop talking about in the show, like JSA, like, I really don't like New Gods, I don't like Ram V's other book, Resurrection Man. Even with all of those negatives in, it's still a little bit underwater. What about Image? Image I can't really comment on because I have all of the imprints broken out. But here's the thing. Is it possible for any publisher to be in the positive? Basically, with all of the books that a publisher puts out, can any publisher survive me reading that many books from them and have me have a positive recommendation index across all of their books. Well, so far there's only, I think, one that has managed to accomplish that this year, and that one should not be surprising based on this countdown. It is Titan Comics, because Titan Books does not put out a ton of books. There are only a few Titan books that I read this year that weren't on the countdown, and because I love Conan so much and love Solomon Kane so much, they are at a 13.3% recommendation index, which means if you flashed a random Titan comic from me off of the stand and said, might I like this book, I would say, yeah, I think actually it's good to take a chance on Titan. Everybody else kind of are somewhere between DC and Marvel in that they have an overall negative recommendation index. But again, that is because I grade everything on a bell curve. So it's really hard for anything to just get all 4s and 5s because I just do not read that way. That's why it's so fascinating to me when any one of these series winds up with 100% recommendation index, because it means I've rated all 4s and 5s, and that's really hard to achieve when you've got this rainbow of ratings and there's only a few 4s and 5s available. So, wow, we've made it through. It's one of my longer streams of all time, but I want to get some of your final comments. So, One Wheel Trek, so that's not good for Marvel, but not surprising in the slightest. Stoop saying understood about Marvel. Nick N saying I'm surprised by Image. I thought it would be higher. The thing is, Image is so many different fiefdoms, and I feel that this year in Image, it's a lot of big swings, but if you look at this countdown, it's not a lot of things that landing, because I don't really love Ghost Machine that much. Energon Universe is okay, but you didn't see any Energon Universe books in my top 60, so that's like another huge portion of DC, or of Image, that's like not up there. So it's kind of like, there are a couple hits here and there from Image, but there's just not a lot of books that I'm like really loving. There's a couple new weird ones that have launched recently, like Sleep, that I'm kind of into, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be a great year for Image with me. Super Chop saying Krisis stats are probably way better than mine. LOL. Folks saying some really nice things. Lance McNair about to dive back into comics now that I finished reading my latest prose. Love the mom. Oh, the Kelly Sue DeConnick's mom in FML is an old punker. Yeah, and part of what I love so much about FML, I really like individual digital issues that have additional content that maybe aren't going to turn up in the trades, and I'm sad when it doesn't turn up in the trades. But there's this whole back matter aspect of FML that's about zines and like punk from the 90s, and Kelly Sue DeConnick writes some auto-bio stuff. I generally don't rate all of that when I'm rating comic books. Like, I try to hold that stuff separate, but it's definitely adding to how much I love every issue. And actually, one of my good friends from high school is a zine librarian in the States. And so even though I'm not personally a zine person, I love that whole zine culture and I love the history of zines. And so that one is very, very interesting to me. And actually, I think we kind of like talked about all of the comments, except for I didn't really talk too much about your comments on Dark Patterns. The way Dark Patterns is building up is incredible, says Quincognito. Dan Waters has burst into being one of my favorite working writers. Check out his run on Lucifer if you have never read it. And also Upstate Gotham is incredible. I don't know, that's a lot of blue on that one cover. It's not that I don't like blue covers, I just like pink covers. So if you've stuck with me for this whole thing, whether it's live or watching on replay, thank you so much. This has been a dream of mine to be able to do this, and the fact that you watched any part of it is a dream to me. So please, in the comments of this video after the video is done, because not everybody goes back and looks at the chat, please put down what your favorite comic series of 2025 so far are. Were they from my top 60? Are they from outside of my top 60? Do we have a disagreement about them, Bunk, and from other people out there? Or did you find some new things to maybe love? If I did my job correctly, I hope you got at least 5 new polls from my top 60. That was my motivation for doing this today, and also to fulfill this long-time dream. This is the secret pilot of me doing something that is not just pull list. It's what I'm tentatively calling, although I did not label it this way, Crisis Countdown, where we count down a large number of things. And the next one to come in the coming weeks, when I next have free time, is going to be a countdown of the runs I want to read the most. I'm surrounded on all sides by runs of comic books from so many different publishers here. And so I went through my whole house with my laptop open. I went through all of my lists, all of my spreadsheets, all of my online purchases I've made for the last 15 years, and I've assembled a master list of every run I've wanted to read, and that will be the next countdown. But there are other countdowns to come, so please, if you haven't already, click the notifications. Do that, because I really try to not abuse that privilege. And also, it helps if you like this video, because it lets you know that other people on YouTube should see it in their recommended videos at the end of videos when more videos are recommended. And I really tried to make this one something that could be valuable to people that could find out about great books all over the place. So please like it and help me spread the word. But other countdowns that could be coming, could there be one about X-Men that might see a collaboration with my online friend, One Wheelchair X? That's been teased for many months. We're getting very close to it. And maybe, possibly, finally a music countdown for me? We will see. So until I'm back with more countdowns, thank you so much for watching. I've been Krisis with a K. If you have never been to my website, wow, how did you get through 15 years of reading comics without going to crushingcrisis.com, which has guides to collect the Marvel, DC, Image, and many other universes as well. And if you want to help me create content like this and have all the technology and the computer and the ring light and the everything and the buying the books and the running the website, I have a Patreon that's called patreon.com/Krisis, that's with a K, and you can chip in there, and the prices are going to be changing in about 27 days. So now is the time to join at the current rates. Until I see you next week for my next pull list catch up, or maybe even later this week for the comic books of July 9th, which includes a new issue of FML. I just want to say to you, please be kind to yourself and others out in the world. Trans rights are human rights. People matter. And please try your best not to have a crisis. Unless, of course, it's me.